inside the game forest of Walberry. In a forest clearing, the aftermath of a battle. Many warriors have been slain. A surviving knight kneels, leaning on his sword before the victors. The young man said that even after all their efforts, he still hadn't shown up. What should they do? The girl sitting on the wooden throne sighed deeply. The girl ordered the executioner to kill the prisoner and swung her axe. The executioner had no time to carry out the order before he was killed by a man who had appeared unnoticed and saved the prisoners. The warriors could not believe their eyes. Could they really be saved? The attackers said it was Hirkin, and they had to capture him. They all had to rush him together. Hirkin, swinging his sword, destroyed his opponents and remained safe and sound. He asked, was attacking him all at once really a good idea? The young man added that they simply couldn't defeat him. It was Hirkin, whose real name was An Jae-hyun, affiliation Ha-Ho Mask, nickname Hero Killer. The warriors apologized to Jae-hyun, saying it was all their fault. They never could have imagined that these scoundrels would be lying in wait here. Jae-hyun hid his sword behind his back and replied that they had nothing to apologize for. Jae-hyun reached out and told the guy to get up. He was fine. Besides, it wasn't their fault. The blame should fall on that pathetic loser who always lags behind because she lacks the skills. Jae-hyun looked at the girl sitting in the chair. The girl said it was a very touching friendship. But why was Jae-hyun being so sentimental? The girl got up from her seat and, walking toward Jae-hyun, said that even if losers banded together, nothing would come of it. It was Sira, whose real name was Chae Seol-yeon, affiliation Thunder Hunters, nickname Queen of Thunder. Jae-hyun told the girl that she was the one who gritted her teeth and recharged every time the losers destroyed her again. Sol-yeon told the guy to watch what he said so he wouldn't have to cry and regret it later. Jae-hyun grabbed the watch face and said he wouldn't regret it. The slot was activated. After that, the young man donned his armor and a blade reappeared in his hand. Jae-hyun pointed the blade at the girl and said that only weaklings like her do that. Sol-yeon got angry and called him an arrogant scoundrel. The girl ordered that this guy be destroyed. Jae-hyun laughed and declared that she still didn't get it. She would never be able to defeat him. However, at that moment, he was found. His body had been pierced right through by a blade. From behind, the very guy he had saved had plunged the blade into Jae-hyun's back. The young man's health began to rapidly decline. His movements were restricted. Jae-hyun dropped the blade from his hands and sank to his knees. He didn't understand what any of this meant. The traitor apologized and added that they all had to make a living. He shouldn't be hated for it. Jae-hyun turned around and looked at the guy. He couldn't believe his eyes. Sol-yeon laughed loudly. Jae-hyun realized that this was a well-planned conspiracy against him. Chae Sol-yeon said that Jae-hyun was very foolish. He was fixated on his little fantasy of friendship, as if that mattered in the face of money. The girl added that she was going to eliminate Hirkin from the game. Sol-yeon added that if she destroyed this guy every time he logged in, he wouldn't be able to make any progress. Sol-yeon noticed that he was constantly playing Warlord. Wasn't he the one who said he was a loser with nothing to look forward to, except this game? Sol-yeon smirked and declared that this guy had turned into trash again. Jae-hyun jumped to his feet, reached out his hand, and shouted for Sol-yeon to shut her filthy mouth. However, the young man couldn't reach his rival. Many swords had pierced his body. He froze in place. Sol-yeon thanked the guys for their help. Jae-hyun asked why they had done this. They knew how much he had sacrificed for their guild. The traitor said that Jae-hyun might as well be dead already. The rivals are offering hundreds of millions for this betrayal. What else could be expected of them? Jae-hyun was surprised. Was it really just about the money? Didn't they know how much he had done for them? Hadn't he told them they were family? A system warning appeared. Player killed. Penalty: unable to log in for the next 2 days. The young man jumped up from his seat. He was in a gaming capsule with a helmet on his head. Game over. Jae-hyun screamed that he had lost everything. The game Warlord became a massive global hit. A red dragon raid was live on air. The dragon was fighting the knights and everything around was on fire. It was a virtual reality game controlled by artificial intelligence. It generated unimaginable amounts of money. This game was the only thing the young man was good at. In real life, he was always called trash. Everyone was amazed at his skill level. This guy is an amazing player. The young man in armor reached out and asked if the player wanted to form a guild with him. It was the only place where our hero mattered. At least that's what he thought. The young man ran out of the room and rushed away. He thought he would find them all and destroy them. Jae-hyun picked up his phone. The guy didn't understand why he had gone through all this trouble. Was it really just so these scoundrels could live comfortably without him? The red light came on at the crosswalk. A truck sped down the road. Staring at his phone, the boy didn't know that in the end, everything would turn out exactly like this. Otherwise, he wouldn't have cared about anyone else from the very beginning. It was already impossible to avoid the collision with the truck. Passers-by screamed. Someone said a person had been hit at the crosswalk. Everything around was covered in blood. The phone said the number he dialed was unavailable. The young man had been hit by a garbage truck. However, he thought he couldn't die now. In his mind was the image of the traitor who had said they'd been offered millions for this. Jae-hyun, losing consciousness, believed he had to take revenge on them all. The system reported that a connection had been established and a user verification was in progress. "Welcome, user Gherkin." The young man opened his eyes. The system reported that training was required. He had to survive a battle against the ruler of the labyrinth, the Minotaur. Gherkin realized this was a tutorial quest from Warlord. But why was this happening? Someone called out to the newbie. The warriors told the boy to stop staring at one spot and pull himself together. He had seen the warning. He must destroy the Minotaur. The vicious monster with glowing eyes roared loudly. The battle began. The warriors said that this monster couldn't be defeated alone. Likely, all three of them would have to take him down together. They'd have to act as tanks. Gherkin was surprised. Could this really be the training Minotaur boss? Hadn't they removed it 5 years ago because of difficulty issues? His comrade asked what 5 years he was talking about. Warworld had been released only 10 months ago. Gherkin said he understood everything. Only 10 months had passed. The young men didn't understand what was going on with this player. The guys started talking among themselves. They needed to pull themselves together and focus. Gherkin, ignoring them, walked ahead. They were surprised. Where was this newbie headed? Gherkin gathered his speed and charged at the monster. His comrades asked, "Has he lost his mind?" The young man, sword in hand, approached the monster and attacked it. His teammates shouted that he might die. The fight was brief. The young people were amazed. Could this guy really have taken down the monster with a single blow? One of the players extended his hand to our hero and said the guy had serious talent. Would he like to join their guild? Gherkin said he had only recently made a decision. The players were surprised by what he was saying. Gherkin added, if he trusted people again in this life, he would become a dog. The hero killer, Gherkin, had regressed. Gherkin found himself back in a gaming capsule with a helmet on his head. The young man looked around. He couldn't figure out where he was. Could this really be the V-Gear store? The young man remembered 5 years ago he couldn't afford his own equipment, so he had to play on the demo unit here. Did that mean he had gone back in time again? Gherkin jumped out of the pod and rushed outside. If that was the case, he couldn't waste any time. The protagonist believed he had 5 years of future knowledge and all the skills he had managed to acquire. If he used them correctly, he could take revenge on the scoundrels. The young man handed the administrator his card and said he needed one standard gaming terminal. The girl took the card and said she would process his payment right away. He'd have to wait a little while. Gherkin began to wonder where he should start. First, he would have to get through a few levels. The clerk told the young man that there weren't enough funds on his card. Gherkin clutched his head. He remembered that he'd always been short on money before. Otherwise, he wouldn't be playing here, but would have bought himself a gaming terminal. Gherkin clutched his head. What should he do? He needed to start making money, but that would take too long. On the screen, a girl was saying that the strongest never fear trials. On the battlefield, indecision is a luxury. The girl was inviting players to become volunteers. It was an exclusive first-rank model. The Queen of Thunder, Seer. She urged them to start playing Warlord right now. Gherkin looked at the screen, which displayed a massive intro for the game. The young man felt he wasn't in a position to nitpick right now. The specialist said that the terminal installation was complete and everything was ready for use. There was only one way to make money. The protagonist turned to an organization that lent money for a single day. The man said that if the guy didn't pay back the debt on time, his life would turn into hell. Gherkin agreed to everything. Even if he had to go through that hell, he had to destroy those scoundrels who had treated him that way. Gherkin put on his helmet and began the connection. User authentication took place. The system welcomed user Gherkin back to Warlord. Gherkin thought that a lot of time had passed, and it was time to show up. A young woman congratulated the young man on completing his training. It was Ariadne. She had come to help him choose a class. Ariadne said that an adventurer must choose their primary class. There are 3 options. The skills he levels up now will determine his class. A warrior is a fighter who wields melee weapons in intense battles. If the guy loves thrilling battles, this class is for him. Hirkin thought that he had played a warrior last time, so he would be able to level up quickly. But it would be difficult in single-player mode later on. This option wasn't suitable. Cleric, a support class that heals and buffs allies using magic. The young man rejected that option too. Hirkin didn't want to waste time supporting others. Ariadne said there was only one option left. The girl wished for his journey to be exciting. The hero looked at himself and realized that the transformation was beginning. The primary class had been selected. The system announced that he was being transported to the tower of the selected class. An old man greeted the young seeker of wisdom. The old man said his name was Golko and that he was a guide on the path of magic. He was an NPC mage. Golko asked the young man to tell him what kind of magic he wanted to learn. Hirkin replied that he was interested in dark magic. Golko asked if the young man meant earth magic. Hirkin repeated that he was interested in dark magic. Golko asked where the young man had even heard of such a thing. Dark magic is powerful, but it devours the caster's soul. Hirkin replied that he knew that. The player said he came here fully aware of the risks, so he wants to learn. It has to be dark magic. The old man said that in that case they could get right down to business, and pulled the mask off his face. Golko added that it had been a long time since he'd seen young people choose this path. If the young man was truly ready, he must place his hand on the book of skills. However, caution was necessary. This path is too treacherous for the faint of heart. Hirkin said it was time to begin. The young man added that his heart was by no means weak. The old man declared that someone truly interesting had finally appeared. In our hero's past life, there was one popular video. A necromancer player had single-handedly defeated the boss. The protagonist believed that right now this was exactly the power he needed. The system reported that the player had successfully become a necromancer. A skeletal fragment was obtained. A small skull emitting blue light appeared in our hero's hand. Hirkin threw the skull to the ground, and a skeleton warrior, imbued with magic, emerged from it. It began to take shape. Hirkin decided it was time to level up. He needed a training dungeon. The skeleton warrior was still very weak, and even the skull couldn't stay on his shoulders. The system reported that the player had entered the beginner's dungeon. Hirkin thought that this didn't look like the calm skeleton he had seen in his past life. What was going on? He needed to check his skill window. The young man realized that the skeleton fragment had a low skill level. It was all because his own level was the lowest. He needed to level up quickly. The monsters appeared just in time. They were training monsters called coal wolves. These monsters weren't strong, but they were quite fast. This made them ideal for testing his capabilities. Hirkin activated the fragment and ordered it to act. The skeleton warrior spotted the enemy and assumed a fighting stance. The skeleton received the order and charged at the monsters. Hirkin said that this was even better than he had expected. The young man believed that at this rate, he would reach the maximum level in no time. However, the skeleton was immediately destroyed. It was no trouble at all for the monsters. A look of deep disappointment appeared on the protagonist's face. How was this possible? Hirkin decided something was wrong here and looked into the skill window again. The protagonist realized what was going on. It turned out he hadn't set the mode. He needed to activate defense mode. Hirkin looked at the monsters tearing the skeleton apart into individual bones. The young man thought that couldn't be possible. He activated special action mode. After that, the skeleton warrior began to dance wildly. And once again, he posed no threat to the monsters. Hirkin thought he wouldn't succeed, and that was disappointing. The system reported that the character could not be deleted. Accounts less than 3 months old cannot delete characters. Hirkin couldn't delete the character. He couldn't change classes. Loan payments were due to start next month. Hirkin was frustrated. Why couldn't he get anything right? Why couldn't this skeleton help him? Hirkin said the skeleton was driving him crazy. How did the necromancer he'd seen in his past life handle this? The system reported that the summoned creature was equipped with a deep learning system and learned through combat. The young man recalled that while he was fighting monsters, the skeleton had been watching him. Hirkin realized that the warrior skeleton needed to be taught everything. The young man picked up a weapon. The protagonist said that the skeleton was lucky because he was its master. People call him a genius. He had even trained all the members of his guild so they could become the best. Hirkin swung his fist and told the skeleton to remember one thing. If he didn't dodge, he would die. The skeleton thrust his staff forward, tense, but did not dodge. As a result, time and again, the skeleton was defeated and sent flying to the side. Hirkin explained, if he was struck, he shouldn't stand still. He had to figure out what to do next. He needed to look for an opportunity to dodge, and then strike back. The skeleton assumed a fighting stance again and prepared to parry the attack. Now, it was time to fight the monsters again. The dogs growled once more and lunged at the skeleton. This time, everything was different. Drawing on his experience, the skeleton dealt with the monsters. The skeleton turned and looked at the man. Hirkin was surprised. Where was he looking? Hadn't he been told not to get distracted during battle? The young man admitted that the skeleton's move wasn't bad. The skeleton fragment's skill was growing. It was acquiring the necessary ability. The system announced that the player's level had increased. The skeleton had passed the test. The newbie village, Figus Castle. The central square was crowded. Players were looking for members of a guild that would become their family. Some were looking for a raid on the forest spider. Hirkin thought that with a few more days of training, he would be able to clear the entire training dungeon solo. Our hero believed that the real test was about to begin. First, he needed to reach level 10. One of the players approached the young man and said he needed to apologize for bumping into someone's shoulder. Hirkin was surprised. Who were these guys? They looked like third-rate thugs. Hirkin knew that every second counted. Maybe he should just wipe out these thugs. The stranger was indignant. What kind of guy sighs like that in the middle of a conversation? He even swung his fist at our hero. Suddenly, a burly man appeared and stopped the stranger by grabbing his arm. The big guy said that this man shouldn't just go around beating people up here. The hooligan asked, "Are they together?" The burly man replied that it wasn't quite like that. Hirkin looked at this guy. He was sure that standing before him was Matador Cheb. He was a high-ranking warrior from his past life. The protagonist was surprised to see what this warrior was doing here. The villain spat and cursed viciously. Rubbing his fists, he told the man not to get involved if he didn't know this guy. This young man had hit him first. The villain asked if the man didn't know the saying, "An eye for an eye." Matador Cheb replied that now he understood everything. The thug suddenly became serious, and his body seemed to burst into flames. Hirkin and the hooligan were surprised to see such a transformation. Matador Cheb said that in that case, he had to do the same. After all, this guy had just pushed him. The hooligan and his friends recognized the guildmaster of the Red Bulls, one of the top 30 guilds. Besides, he's known for loving to fight. He's a real killer. Matador approached the hooligan and asked what his answer would be. The bully apologized and ran away with his friends. They were very scared. Matador Cheb called after them, saying he was very glad they'd been able to settle the matter with words. The big guy asked our hero if he was okay. Don't pay any attention to guys like these. Hirkin thanked him and added that next time he shouldn't help him. He could handle it on his own. Matador Cheb watched the young man walk away and thought that this kid was very cold. Hirkin was angry at himself, because at that moment he had been intimidated by Matador Cheb's strength. Our hero believed that the next time they met, he would be a completely different person. As he reflected, Hirkin realized that he had indeed felt the gap in strength between them. Suri and Cheb were on the same level of skill. To take revenge, he must become stronger. A huge monster, a wild beast appeared above the young man. The protagonist didn't react at all. The skeleton reacted, immediately attacking the monster and plunging its sword into its chest. The monster was mercilessly destroyed. The skeleton warrior had done his job. The system reported that the skeleton warrior had finished hunting the cold tiger. His level had been raised. Hirkin thought that it had taken him 3 days to reach level 10. It had taken longer than he expected. The system congratulated the player on reaching level 10. There were no more monsters in this training dungeon. The novice symbol was removed. Hirkin thought that he had finally reached a milestone. Now things would be different. A war watch appeared on the young man's wrist. Stats, quests, map, inventory, and messenger. All of these were features built into the game. Hirkin said he hadn't felt this way in a long time and opened the status window. As expected, our hero's stats had been reset. The young man decided to think carefully about how to spend his first stat points. Necromancers usually boost mana or intelligence. However, our hero put all his points into strength. The system reported that strength had been increased by 50. The skeleton looked at its master with regret. Hirkin was surprised. What had happened to him? The young man declared that he had no intention of giving up necromancy. He needed strength to train the skeleton. Hirkin thought that even if he had leveled up his mana and intelligence right now, the gameplay wouldn't have changed. However, by leveling up his strength, he could teach the skeleton his best gameplay. The young man said that his life depended on the skeleton's progress, so he just had to keep training. Hirkin added that, in any case, it's always possible to compensate for any shortcomings in certain characteristics. Figgis Castle, a raiders guild. The protagonist entered the building. The players fought among themselves for the right to receive a new quest. Hirkin proceeded deeper into the establishment. The young man thought that the quests weren't very good at the moment, but these guys' enthusiasm was contagious. They were just newbies. Hirkin approached the old man and said he wanted a quest too. Could he take a look? The old man said that only difficult quests with low rewards were left. That's why no one takes them. Hirkin pulled out a map and said he'd found his quest. It's pure gold. The Cave of Mount Bhima. You must destroy all the monsters around the mountain. The reward is 10 gold coins. The old man wondered if the young man was sure of himself. The system reported that the player had accepted a new quest. Hirkin thought that if he completed this boring quest, he would be able to obtain a very rare title. Promising? The promising title boosts stats, calculating them as a percentage. In other words, it's a quick start to our hero's career. Hirkin decided it was time to start with his gear. The young man headed to the foot of Mount Bhima. It was time to complete this quest. Our hero's appearance had become rather unkempt. What kind of gear is this? Hirkin was extremely upset when he realized how he looked. The young man had no money left after buying equipment for the skeleton, so he had to settle for this. Hirkin decided he needed to finish this quest as quickly as possible and buy some decent gear. Hirkin rushed off in search of monsters, believing he couldn't waste a single second. Suddenly, a bloodied man emerged from the bushes. He shouted that he needed help. This man's companions were hiding in the bushes. They were waiting for a victim. A knight appeared on the forest path. He said that his adventure was about to begin. That was why he had come to Mount Bhima. Multi thought he was pretty good at this game, since he was already at level 11. At this rate, he could become a top-ranked player. Multi heard the cry for help. The player was shouting that his friend was wounded and asking for help. A bloodied young man lay nearby. Multi ran over energetically and asked what had happened. The young man replied that they had been attacked by a monster they had never seen before. They barely managed to escape, but they currently had no healing potions. Multi said he had a few potions and would help right away. The knight activated his watch. The young man burst into tears and said they would definitely repay the knight. At that moment, an armed thug appeared behind the knight and swung his mace. Multi was deactivated and fell to the ground. The young man thanked the knight. The villain said they would definitely make the most of these items. The wounded man also smirked. Multi said he had been tricked. They were real cowards. The villain wondered why this knight was saying such nasty things. The deceiver declared that the knight was a fool for falling for such a trick. He was nothing but a laughingstock. The system reported that the player Multi had died. The player's timer was reset. The villain said that newbies are always fun. Did they see his reaction? These were members of the Ralph family, a guild of assassin players. The young man said they needed to find their next victim. The skeleton, having acquired the necessary skill, drew its sword and prepared to fight the monsters. Hirkin activated the skeleton's attack mode. The skeleton immediately rushed into battle, his eyes glowing fiercely. The system reported that the skeleton warrior had finished hunting the ancient tree wolf. The necessary experience had been gained. Now that the skeleton had a sword, a pack of wolves seemed like nothing. Getting equipment for the skeleton first was the right decision. A true gamer cares more about gear than about appearance. The skeleton looked at the man and became upset. Hirkin was surprised. What was the skeleton thinking? Hirkin turned around and said that if the skeleton was done, it should follow him. They needed to level up quickly to clear this area. The skeleton turned and followed his master. The look on his face showed that he was determined. However, at some point, an arrow pierced the skeleton's skull. It was quite unexpected. Players emerged from the woods. One of them apologized and said that the skeleton had looked like a monster from a distance. The stranger apologized for the misunderstanding. Hirkin replied that it was all right. The young man noticed the stranger had a blood-stained sword on his back and several blood-stained watches on his wrist. The protagonist apologized and said he would forgive the man if he compensated him with a mana potion. The young man said they didn't have any potions. What were they to do? But if mana automatically increased when their level went up, they could help the guy do that. Hirkin was surprised. Did they really not mind? The stranger noted that it was their fault and they were willing to at least do that. Gherkin agreed and noted that the monsters had appeared at just the right time. And the villain told his colleagues that they would weaken this man and then finish him off. The bandits agreed to follow the previously planned scenario. After fending off the aggressive monster's attack, they would move on to the next stage. The villain noted that an attack buff would be applied. This would give them a tactical advantage. After that, he would send one monster toward the man, pretending to have made a mistake. Gherkin pretended to be frightened and shouted that the monster was approaching him. At first, the villains were pleased that everything was going according to their plan, but their expressions changed. They saw the skeleton destroy the monster. Its master said it could have been worse. Why can't the skeleton move faster? The young man told the strangers that everything was fine, and they could continue without worry. The villains were surprised. Why was this man's call so powerful? The villains realized that this guy's level was significantly higher than it seemed at first glance. They decided to send several monsters at him at once. As soon as he was distracted, they would destroy him by attacking from behind. However, the protagonist effectively dodged the attack. The villain was surprised. How did that happen? Our hero counterattacked the villain, delivering a powerful sword strike to his chest. The surviving villains were stunned by how this guy and the skeleton had managed to take out their colleagues so quickly. Gherkin turned and rushed toward the villains, sword held aloft. The skeleton followed in the same direction. The frightened bandits shouted for the young man to stop. They suggested talking it out and settling things peacefully. Gherkin didn't stand on ceremony and struck the villains with his sword. The skeleton did the same. Blood spattered everywhere. Gherkin approached the villain and said that he knew scoundrels like him all too well. These scoundrels deceive people and take everything they have. The young man added that if he had encountered these villains in a past life, he too would have easily fallen for their tricks. The wounded villain told the young man to stop. He was ready to give him everything he had. Gherkin refused. The protagonist swung his sword and said he no longer trusted people. The bandits were destroyed. The system reported that the player Ralph had been defeated. 8 unclaimed Warwatch watches dropped. The protagonist said that this deceiver was crazy. The young man noted that since things had turned out this way, he would make use of the villain's items. He decided to start with his clothes. Gherkin looked back and saw the skeleton continuing to strike the body of the defeated villain, thus working off his hatred. Gherkin suggested that the skeleton take something for himself. After that, the skeleton took the sword and began swinging it above his head. Gherkin told the skeleton that appearance didn't matter when he was playing the game. What mattered was the gear and what was inside. The protagonist said that 8 pairs of war watches were a real jackpot. When you sell another player's watch, a random item drops from their inventory, any of the rare items with a choice available. Black goblin pants that increased mana and intelligence. A sword imbued with the essence of an ancient tree, which also increased mana. You could also get a skill book, Demon's Curse. The real jackpot was getting money. A very important artifact began to materialize in our hero's hands. The young man received the mask, and it happened faster than he had previously anticipated. Gherkin said that from now on he would record his gameplay. Building a good persona is very important. The young man said that if everyone in the guild wore the Ha-Ho mask, it would make them popular. A suggestion was made to name the guild Ha-Ho's Mask. The protagonist had even considered choosing a completely different name. The young man didn't want others to steal his things anymore. He would use this. Our hero put on the mask and told the skeleton that they were moving on. At the end of the stone path, at the foot of the cliff, a portal to the dungeon was visible. The system reported that the player had entered the Cave of Mount Bima dungeon. Gherkin surmised that blue werewolves appeared in this cave dungeon. It's a challenging dungeon, but since the young man had the best gear, the dungeon should prove to be easy. The protagonist aimed for a 10-minute speed run. Gherkin rushed deep into the dungeon and told the skeleton not to fall behind. Several hours passed and the young man was discouraged. There were absolutely no monsters here. Gherkin thought a message should have appeared saying that someone had already cleared this dungeon. Could this be a bug? Gherkin saw a strange glow on the wall and the presence of biomass. The protagonist immediately realized what was in front of them. The spot had grown to an incredible size. The system reported that the player had discovered the Scene instance. Now it was no surprise that there were no monsters here. An instance is a one-time dungeon that randomly appears inside regular dungeons. When they appear, regular dungeons become inactive until the instance is cleared. They are more difficult than regular dungeons, but the rewards are better. The problem was that the player either clears the instance or dies in it. Gherkin thought that, from a rational standpoint, He shouldn't take the risk. After all, he wouldn't be able to play for 2 days if he died. It would be wiser to drop everything and tackle other quests. However, the protagonist knew that he simply had to clear the instance. Hirkin proceeded inside and found himself in the arena of a large, ruined amphitheater. Hirkin was surprised. Could this really be the Colosseum? The young man was scared, but at the same time intrigued. What would happen next? Suddenly, a huge monster appeared before our hero. Its eyes glowed, and it growled loudly. It was an infected werewolf, whose level was difficult to determine. The werewolf attacked, and the protagonist managed to jump out of the way at the last moment. However, he couldn't completely avoid the blow. The skeleton saw that its master had been knocked aside and decided to join the fight as well. Hirkin wondered why he was having such bad luck today. Infected monsters are tied to the main quest. Hirkin warned the skeleton that if they didn't destroy this monster today, there would be no dinner. The skeleton took on a determined look, thrust his sword forward, and bravely charged at the monster. Hirkin leaped high into the air and decided to attack the infected monster by diving straight at it. The monster raised its head and bared its fangs. The young man realized he had to choose a curse. Demon's curse was activated. The sword became shrouded in demonic energy. The infected monster took significant damage. It roared loudly in pain and lost its bearings. Hirkin thought that Demon's curse wasn't so bad for his first time. The monster was deactivated. The beast mustered its last strength, leaped to its feet, and lunged at our hero once more. The system reported that the infected werewolf was enraged. All status effects are canceled. Hirkin figured this wouldn't be an instance if it were that simple. The young man added that he had been putting it off, but now perhaps it was time to try. The protagonist turned the watch face, and the slot was activated. Our hero donned his armor and said that now he was ready to play for real. Slot activation is one of Warlord's unique features. When a player uses slots, they are temporarily imbued with power drawn from the world of Warlord, taking on an enhanced form. This form varies greatly from player to player. It's all individual here. That's why most users often call it an ult. Hirkin beckoned the monster with his finger and told it to attack. The infected monster roared loudly and lunged at the opponent. Our hero skillfully dodged the beast's attacks, effectively counterattacking it in the process. As expected of a boss monster, its speed and power were simply staggering. If it managed to land 3 attacks in a row, the game would be over for our hero. However, the young man activated his unique abilities and dealt the monster a blow that was incompatible with its continued existence. Hirkin said that this is exactly what makes the game interesting for him. The infected monster tapped into its inner, hidden reserves and attacked its opponent once more. Hirkin noted that this was its enraged state. Hirkin saw the skeleton and asked if it, too, had forgotten something. The skeleton prepared to attack the monster again. The skeleton drew the monster's attention to itself, giving the young man a chance to recover a little. Hirkin suggested that the skeleton perform the attack they had practiced together during their joint training sessions. The monster was attacked simultaneously from 2 sides. The attack was risky but effective. The werewolf's multiple wounds led to heavy bloodshed, and its body was torn to pieces. The system reported that the werewolf hunt was complete. The slot is being deactivated. In the new quest near the cave on Mount Bhima, you must destroy all monsters and receive a reward of 10 gold. The system reported that the skeleton warrior had defeated a powerful monster. The skeleton fragment skill had risen in rank. The hero received the werewolf's skull and pelt. The skeleton was satisfied. The protagonist said that the rewards in instances truly pleased him. As a reward, the player received the necromancer's necklace. This necklace boosts class stats and cannot be traded. The young man thought that even if the necklace couldn't be traded, it was a higher tier than standard unique items. The system reported that 3 new titles had been registered. The protagonist thought that promising newcomer was exactly what he had been aiming for from the start. Hirkin thought that Infected Pathfinder was the introductory title of the first chapter of the main quest. The main quest is the central storyline that forms the foundation of the Warlord universe. Every player wants to participate in it somehow. Because the reward is extraordinary, it is Warlord's flagship content. In his previous life, our hero barely made it to the 4th chapter, but now he's already unlocked it. The young man believed this wasn't just luck. Hirkin boldly claimed that he had hit the jackpot and that this was his big break. Breaking news reported that the Hydra Guild was officially entering the final chapter of the Count's infection scenario. Their goal was to complete it within 3 months. The young man paused the image on the monitor screen. Now it didn't look like a jackpot at all. Someone had already entered the final chapter of the Count's infection scenario. If he tried to join now, he wouldn't get anything at all. This was the worst loss of all. Hirkin thought he should skip this round and aim for the next chapter. However, at that very moment, our hero changed his mind and decided that this might actually be an opportunity for him. Hirkin stared intently at the monitor screen. Right now, the whole world is watching the Count's infection with interest. It's the first main quest in Warlord, and it's on the verge of completion. What would happen if he released a video related to the Count's infection right now? The protagonist decided that the view count could go through the roof. Life would take on a whole new color. Our hero considered it a good habit to record all his gameplay. He would edit it and upload it directly to WTube. The young man understood that editing was the key. You can't trust just anyone with it. Romany was the one they called the god of editing. She was from our hero's past life. The girl received a message from Hirkin and wondered what kind of video this was that would clear the dungeon on the 15th level. Surely it was just a rich newbie trying to show off. Romany suddenly jumped up from her chair. She said she had found it. Romany believed that this was her true muse. Romany was one of the best freelancers in the field of video editing. An assistant entered the office and asked if the lady had called for him. The girl announced that a video had appeared related to the Count's infection. The girl showed the assistant the video on her tablet and said it was quite interesting. A level 15 solo player had defeated an infected werewolf. The assistant said their team had checked it out too. The infected werewolf's level isn't high, so it's not worth paying attention to. The girl said she liked it. The girl told them to bring it to her. It was Che Sol-yeon, #1 in the global business rankings and the successor to the Thunder Group. She was also known in certain circles as the Queen of Thunder, Sire. The young man looked at the uploaded video and didn't understand what was going on. The protagonist had uploaded it just yesterday. But where did all those views come from? Already over 6,000. In a past life, it would have taken months to rack up that many views. There was another piece of news. Romany was the first to reach out. She was known for her aloofness, which was part of her enigmatic image. Romany asked when the next video would be. The young man replied that he was just thinking about it. The protagonist admitted that he didn't know what to film for the next video. It was unlikely he'd find a monster on the level of an infected werewolf. Our hero had an idea and he logged into the game. Matador Cheb was watching a video featuring Hirkin from The Mask of Haho. His movements impressed him. However, this Hirkin seemed familiar to him. Where had they met? Yell approached the young man and asked who this acquaintance was. Matador said there was this guy, Hirkin from Mask of Haho. He's been trending lately. Yell said Cheb watches him a lot, so it would be strange not to recognize him. Matador noted that when you first play this game, the realism usually makes people freeze up. But this guy shows no signs of that. He's trained his ghost skeleton. It's on a completely different level than other necromancer's summons. Matador remarked that it would be great to fight him head-on, but he probably doesn't accept duel challenges. Yell told Cheb to stop. The girl told Cheb to at least go inside. The live stream will start in a few minutes. Matador said he appreciated her concern, though she already knew that. Yell told Matador to behave himself during today's stream and not embarrass himself. 200,000 people bought tickets for the live stream. The excitement was unprecedented. The host invited everyone to welcome the leader of the Red Bulls, the best player ranked 9th in Warlord, Matador Cheba. A message came in that the dungeon gates were about to open. Participants were to prepare for battle. There was disappointment among the Raiders Guild in Figus Castle. There wasn't a single decent quest. This was entirely expected. But how was such a thing even possible? The young man cursed the newbie village for it. Our hero began to consider putting his video content on hold. An old man approached the young man and said, "So it was you after all, the adventurer who cleared out Bima's cave?" The old man said his name was Hotan and asked for a moment of his time. In his office, Hotan said he'd heard the story about how the young man had seen a mutated monster in Bima's cave. The old man said he didn't recall there being such a quest. Hirkin admitted that he had seen a werewolf with strange eyes. Hotan stated that the monster the young man had encountered had most likely been affected by the power of the Distorted One. The old man noted that they didn't yet know who the Distorted One was. However, his power infects monsters, and this certainly causes great harm. Houghton added that, in light of this, the Raiders Guild had put a bounty on his head. Hirkin declared that he would do everything in his power to catch this vicious scoundrel. The protagonist thought this was a hidden quest. Hirkin declared that he was ready to set out right away. Houghton thought it was too early to do so. The old man said he would give the young man a chance for his success on that mission. There is a man named Akhimri. He is in Bansu Castle, east of Figus Castle. Houghton added that this man would be able to train the young man. To that end, he would now receive a letter of recommendation. The test is called Ahimbri's Teachings. You must find Ahimbri and show him the letter from Houghton. The reward will be a skill book. The protagonist left the room, feeling extremely happy. He had received a quest to become Ahimbri's apprentice. Ahimbri is one of Archmage Bogan's 7 apprentices. Every mage player desperately wants to meet him, because through him one can obtain many rare skill books. In other words, he was an extremely important NPC. Such an opportunity could not be missed. Hirkin thought that since the Rising Star title and the main quest, the Count's Infection, overlapped, that was precisely what had triggered this opportunity. If everything went well, he wouldn't have to worry about video content anymore. The protagonist remembered that he had to take care of something first. The young man in the forest clearing dropped the skull on the ground and activated Skeleton Fragment. Our hero realized he still hadn't sorted through the loot from the previous battle. He decided to first use the werewolf skull he hadn't sold. This was necessary to strengthen the skeleton warrior. The skeleton warrior gained werewolf traits and its durability increased. He also needed to use the necromancer's necklace. It was equipped. The system reported that the effect of the necrotic pathfinder's necklace had been applied and all stats were increased. Hirkin said that the preparations were complete. Everything looked perfect. Our hero decided to activate the skeleton fragment and 2 skulls appeared in his palm. The equipped skeleton noticed that 2 more clones had appeared behind him. The skeleton got scared and started pointing them out to its master. The protagonist declared that from now on, the 3 of them would fight together, and now they needed to get used to each other. The first skeleton dropped to his knees and clutched his head. He hadn't expected such a turn of events. A level 25 forest bear appeared just in time. It swung its massive paw and attacked the man. The skeleton didn't lose his composure and immediately attacked the bear, sword in hand. The bear struck, and the skeleton was sent flying far backward. Losing his balance, he fell. Hirkin was surprised. Did the skeleton really think such a predictable attack would work? He should have come at it from its blind spot. Another skeleton repeated the attack following the same pattern. The result was the same. The skeleton was sent flying far backward, unable to withstand the bear's blow. Hirkin was indignant. He had told them to approach from the blind spot. Why repeat the same thing the previous one did? The third skeleton, the most experienced, decided to choose his own tactic. Skeleton leaped high, mimicking its master's movements. Hirkin was surprised. However, the bear took out the skeleton too, striking while it was still in the air. The skull flew far backward. The protagonist dealt with this monster himself and asked the skeletons if they had any brains. The question was rhetorical. The young man allowed the skeletons to put their skulls back on their shoulders. The man said that when they attack a monster, they must turn toward the direction from which the attack is coming. Hirkin explained that this was precisely why they had to approach from the opponent's blind spot. The young man looked at the skeleton's dumb expressions and said they annoyed him even more. Hirkin thought this was great. His skill rank had gone up, and now he could summon 3 skeletons thanks to the effect of the infected tracker's necklace. But the problem was that they couldn't work together. Skeletons do everything exactly as one of them taught them earlier. But since they hadn't learned to fight together, they didn't know how to act in a coordinated manner. Hirkin realized that he was using 3 times as much mana, but the skeletons were even worse than before. Our hero reached level 20, just as he wanted. However, he won't be able to record content for a while. Hirkin told the skeletons to get up. They would train until they reached Bansu Castle. Earlier, our hero had assumed he could leave the fighting to these guys and sit back and relax, as a necromancer should. However, he won't be able to avoid having to be on the front lines. Hirkin continued along the forest road following the set route, heading toward the castle. The skeletons ran after him. Raiders Guild, Bansu Castle. The guild hall was bustling with activity. There were many players present, eager to receive a quest. One of the players emerged from the office and everyone fell silent, turning their attention to him. The players rushed toward this person and began asking what quest he had received. He had to speak quickly, without keeping these good and honest people waiting. A hooded figure entered the room. It was our hero. The young man looked at the players and thought they were behaving just like hyenas. Hirkin thought that these people weren't even trying to better themselves. They just wanted to profit at others' expense. One of the men approached the protagonist and said that if he had any good quests, he was interested. Our hero couldn't let them find out that he was on a quest for a Kimbri. Gurkhan handed the guard an envelope and said he had brought a letter of recommendation from Khotan. The guard confirmed this and said the young man could go up to the second floor. The players tried to push their way through, shouting that they were in the same party as this man. The knight on duty wouldn't let anyone through. The protagonist wondered what reward a Kimbri had prepared for him. It must be something good if it's a hidden quest. Gurkhan hoped to establish a long-term relationship with him. The young man knocked on the office door, opened it slightly, and apologized. The room was a terrible mess. Books were strewn everywhere. The owner of the office asked who was standing before him. He didn't recall having an appointment scheduled for today. It was the NPC Akimbri. Our hero introduced himself and said he had come on a recommendation from Khotan. Akimbri noted that the young man still looked like a black mage apprentice. He must be quite good for his level. Gurkhan claimed he was just lucky. Akimbri said he would give the young man the promised rewards. The protagonist received skill and ability books. Gurkhan was delighted, for he had received 2 whole books. Moreover, both looked very rare. Akimbri turned away and said that their conversation was over. The quest Akimbri's teaching was complete. He told the young man to pull himself together. Our hero was surprised. Why did the quest end so quickly? He needed to get the next one. Gurkhan thought that he hadn't gone through all this just to gain a few skills. The young man shouted that he would do anything just to get the quest. Akimbri returned and took the protagonist by the hand. He asked, was the young man really willing to do anything? Our hero's mentor thanked him. A new quest, Egg from the Nest, was received. You must bring an egg from the nest. There will be no reward for this. Gurkhan was extremely upset. This mage had outsmarted him. The players parted when they saw a majestic knight walking down the main street. Everyone realized he was wearing super expensive gear, which meant he wasn't just anyone. The knight asked where the Mask of Haho was currently located. Gurkhan left the mage's office. He was extremely upset because some NPC had tricked him. The protagonist had assumed he'd be given a quest related to the main storyline. Instead, he'd have to run around carrying eggs, and there'd be no reward for it. The young man was upset. Did he really have to do this? A player appeared before our hero and asked, "Are we talking about a quest?" Other players rushed toward the protagonist and shouted that this person had a new quest and needed to be captured immediately. Suddenly, someone shouted for everyone to step aside immediately and let him through. It was a knight. He approached our hero. The knight asked the young man if he had a moment. He said they needed to discuss something, but in a quiet place. Gurkhan was surprised. Who on earth was this? Our hero told the knight to step aside. The knight asked Mr. Mask Haho to make way for him. Stepping aside to a secluded spot, the knight apologized for the disturbance. The knight pressed Warwatch and deactivated the slot. He thought they wouldn't be able to talk properly with so many people around. Gurkhan thought that, judging by his gear, this was definitely a ranker. However, our hero couldn't place him. Gurkhan asked who this guy was and why they were looking for him. The ranker asked, "Isn't that a Haho mask right in front of me?" Our hero knew that in situations like this, it was best to pretend he didn't understand what was going on. Gurkhan asked, "What is a Haho mask?" He followed the knight because the knight wanted to talk, but now he didn't understand the point of the conversation. The knight said that this young man had just received a quest from an NPC named Akimbri. There was no denying it. Gurkhan was indignant. Who is this guy, and why do we need to share information with him? The protagonist asked, "Is this stranger asking for trouble? If he meddles again, he'll get more than he bargained for. He'll have to face the full force of the law." Gurkhan didn't know who was standing before him, but he just had to pretend he didn't understand anything. The protagonist was curious to see what this man would do next. The stranger bowed, extended his hand, and apologized. He said he had most likely made a mistake. Gurkhan shook the stranger's hand and thought that the guy was definitely scared. Gurkhan turned around and walked away. He said he would forgive the man this time, and decided that the young man was definitely itching to fight. A girl appeared nearby. She suggested that this wasn't the one they were looking for. The young man said that he really was a newbie. If he were an experienced player of Warlord, he would know that Warwatch shouldn't be shown to just anyone, even for a split second. The girl asked, "Do they really need to monitor this Akimbri's quests? The infected count quest is almost complete. Even if someone intervenes now, they won't be able to change anything." She said that the Egg from the Nest quest was the main quest. They couldn't take that risk. The young people went their separate ways and agreed to meet again soon. Our hero watched this conversation from a nearby window. He realized there were two of them. They must definitely be part of some kind of organization if they're working together. What's behind this? If they were from a regular guild, they would have introduced themselves properly and offered a deal. This didn't look like a routine check. Were they just like that in general? Hirkin thought he would have to solve this puzzle on his own. However, now he had to stay constantly on guard. Hirkin continued training the skeletons and realized that he knew one thing for sure. The egg quest was definitely not an ordinary quest. The number of unknowns in this puzzle was growing. The protagonist surmised that these two might have seen his video posted on YouTube. They definitely knew that the Haho mask had been sent to Akinbri. The young man thought if they let him go so easily, they weren't very concerned about finding Haho's mask. Hirkin didn't know what was going on around him. However, if he continued to move forward with the plot, he would run into these people again. The protagonist decided to stop posting videos for a while so the fuss would die down. Hirkin was upset. Why were some crazy people constantly ruining his life? Our hero felt that he had his hands full with just Chai Sol-yeon. Meanwhile, she was devoting herself to her training. The assistant said it was excellent work. It was Park Suji, Chai Sol-yeon's secretary. Park Suji asked how the guild entrance exam had gone. Sol-yeon took off her helmet and said they were all just trash. How was it possible that there wasn't a single competent person among them? The secretary agreed that it was simply awful. Sol-yeon asked if there was any news about the Haho mask. Park Suji speculated that whoever posted the video must have already joined some guild if they hadn't responded yet. Sol-yeon got extremely angry when she thought that might actually be the case. Park Suji said she would definitely check it again, since it was just her assumption. Sol-yeon added that she needed reliable facts, not speculation. Sol-yeon asked what the president had said. Park Suji replied that he hadn't said anything yet. Sol-yeon understood that he would remain silent as long as she was making progress in Warlord. Sol-yeon remarked that as soon as she mentioned she was playing, he almost forced her to get married. Sol-yeon told the secretary to announce the guild recruitment again. She was expecting a report tomorrow morning. Sol-yeon left the room. Park Suji thought that waiting until tomorrow morning was too long. The lady had a very sharp temper. Once he arrived at the lizard swamp, the protagonist realized he hadn't been here in a long time. Hirkin thought that Akinbri was in Bansu Castle. That meant the quest must be carried out in the surrounding region. Since he needed to find an egg, it could belong to either a bird, a reptile, or an insect-like monster. The young man thought, excluding places inaccessible due to his current level, only the lizard swamp remained. The protagonist decided to start his search here. If nothing came of it, he would have to go to another region. He told the skeleton warrior that the monsters here were tougher, so it was worth strengthening himself as much as possible, using his entire arsenal. The skeleton received a helmet of madness. To do this, our hero inscribed symbols on the skull and cast a spell. Hirkin was impressed, for the skeleton had even grown horns, albeit fiery ones. Hirkin said that a test must be passed first and ordered the skeleton to attack him. The skeleton went mad and, with glowing eye sockets, lunged at its master. Hirkin struck a blow and knocked the skull off the skeleton's shoulders, sending it flying far to the side. Hirkin asked what had come over the skeleton and whether it was even possible to attack one's master with such fury. The protagonist suggested that it was some kind of glitch. There were no other explanations. Our hero said the skeleton hadn't done it on purpose. Could it be that its skill had glitched too? A monster leaped out of the woods. It was a level 30 lizard man. Hirkin said that this was perfect timing. Now they could test the skeleton in battle. The Helm of Madness was activated, and bone armor was also equipped. Hirkin ordered the mad skeletons to attack the monsters and deactivate them if possible. The battle was chaotic, but the monsters were quickly destroyed. The system reported that the skeletons had destroyed 3 lizardmen. Experience points were earned, and the level was raised. Hirkin told the skeletons that for the next week they would hunt monsters and search for the egg along the way. If they didn't find it, they would have to go somewhere else. A girl stepped out into the forest clearing and said her name was Ilya. Ilya believed that her incomparable beauty was obvious to everyone. The girl didn't like to brag, but it was the truth, and there was no point in denying it. No matter what she did, everyone always loved her. Ilya believed that everything in her life was going well. If she ever got into trouble, her loyal servants would rush to her aid. However, the beauty's foot gave way, and she fell face first into a muddy swamp. The girl lifted her head and thought that this place simply made her sick. Ilya remembered that one of her servants had promised that she could easily level up here. He suggested that she simply follow him, but disaster struck. That young man had died and now she was stuck here. The monsters around her were too strong. She was afraid to take a step. All she needed was a single slave. Ilya saw a young man accompanied by skeletons who were effectively fighting the monsters. Ilya thought that this was her new slave. Surely he had to help her. The girl ran out from behind a tree but didn't make it. She twisted her ankle and fell. She asked the young man to help her. The girl sniffled and said she couldn't walk anymore because she had hurt her leg. Ilya decided that the young man's heart must now be breaking at the sight of the beautiful maiden suffering so. The girl knew that this man wouldn't be able to resist and would definitely want to help her. However, the young man began to walk away. Ilya didn't understand where he was going. Such a beauty needed help, and he was blatantly ignoring her. The girl shouted for Mr. Necromancer to stop. Hirkin decided that she reeked of trouble. Ilya was furious. How dare he ignore her? Hirkin continued to watch as the skeletons fought the monster effectively. The girl kept crying and saying that she was in a lot of pain. Hirkin thought it was getting on his nerves. Why was she so annoying? Our hero ignored the girl because he didn't want to waste time. However, she wouldn't let up. This brought back unpleasant memories for the young man. Couldn't she just play normally? Hirkin decided it was time to put an end to this and asked what she wanted. Ilya replied that she had dropped her sword in one of the swamps while hunting. She asked the young man to help her retrieve it. Hirkin told her not to bother him anymore once he had returned the sword. The girl promised and thanked him in advance. She added that she wouldn't forget his help. Ilya decided that this guy had taken the bait. Hirkin saw the sword sticking out of the ground on a small island in the swamp. The young man said he had found it. Ilya thanked the guy and said she wouldn't have managed without him. Hirkin told her to keep her word now. He would retrieve the sword and she would go her own way. The young man ordered the skeletons to retrieve the sword from the swamp. Ilya thought that necromancers were helpless without their puppets. How dare this guy ignore her? She decided to strike the young man while he was defenseless and had his back to her. The protagonist anticipated this, spun around, and grabbed the girl by the collar. The young man lifted her up and threw her toward the sword, straight into the swamp. The girl fell into the swamp and began cursing loudly, hurling insults at the necromancer. Ilya declared she wouldn't let it go. Her loyal fans would destroy this young man in a second. Hirkin laughed and told the girl that the danger was behind her. Ilya looked back and saw huge lizard-like monsters above her. The girl was frightened. The protagonist said that if she wanted to deceive him, she should have tried harder. Hirkin remarked that he could see right through people like her. Now he couldn't be fooled. The young man was tired of the endless deceit from others. Hirkin said he'd wasted his time on her and told the skeletons to hurry after him. The protagonist looked back and wondered, what is this skeleton up to? He had just learned the art of seduction. Hirkin told the skeletons to stop learning dubious things. Otherwise, he would bury them with all their ribs. The system reported that the player Ilya had been destroyed. The young man received points for this destruction. It was unexpected, since he personally hadn't had a hand in it. Hirkin recalled the girl's threats when she said her loyal fans would take revenge on him. Could anyone really be a fan of someone as foolish as her? Yet such fans did indeed exist. They were watching the scene through surveillance cameras. One of the fans tried to harm our hero, claiming he had to avenge Miss Ilya. However, the attempt failed. Hirkin said he wanted to ask a question. Why go so far for a girl like that? After all, the young man wouldn't gain anything from it. If he avenged her, did he really think she'd go on a date with him? Why is this fan so obsessed with a girl from a game he's never even seen in person? The fan shouted that it was all because he loved her so much. Hirkin swung his sword and said that was just ridiculous. That crazy girl had tried hard to trick him, and she paid the price for it. Our hero didn't believe that this whining, cornered girl would become a reality. The girl told her fans that she was very sad. She was just asking a man for help. However, this necromancer attacked her out of the blue. Her fans were in tears and ready to take revenge on anyone for her. Because of this, the crazed fans began chasing our hero every day. Hirkin was already worried because he couldn't find the egg. Now a gang of thugs is hot on his heels. The system reported that the player had obtained an abandoned war watch. The watch had been taken from the body of the deceased player, Ilya. The system reported that the player had received 5,000 gold coins and a pair of goblin leather boots. A super rare item was also offered, the Necklace of Promise. It could be sold for a decent sum. Hirkin said he wanted to praise the goddess. Love is awesome. The young man thanked this crazy woman. Suddenly, another fan appeared. He shouted that he had found Ilya's enemy. Many armed players appeared in the clearing, calling themselves Ilya's fans. The necromancer said that he was indeed the very person who had killed the girl. However, there turned out to be a great many fans. They kept arriving. Gurkhan decided it would be best to flee. The skeletons followed him. Gurkhan wondered, did this girl really have that many fans? The protagonist told the skeletons that there was work for them and sent them after their pursuers. A skeleton activated the magic of love skill and was immediately destroyed by a fan. Gurkhan shouted angrily that there was no such skill. The system reported that the skeleton warrior had been destroyed. Gurkhan thought this was too much. These fans turned out to be a level higher than previously assumed. Gurkhan kept running, but shouted that he would return as soon as he leveled up, and then everyone would regret it. Our hero kept hiding in the forest. He couldn't shake off his pursuers because he was lower level than them, but he had to keep going. Gurkhan stopped and looked around. The area seemed suspicious. This place was different from other swamps. The young man couldn't recall anything like this from his past life. He had never seen such colors. The fans emerged into the clearing. They wondered, why was this necromancer so fast? Where could he have gone? One of the pursuers said he could see the necromancer's skeletons. The skeletons were dancing on the shifting ground. The place was dangerous. A fan got angry and called our hero a cursed sorcerer. Not only had he dealt with Lady Ilya, but he also didn't care about them at all. The fat man shouted that he couldn't forgive this, thrust his sword forward, and charged at the skeletons. However, the fans stood before the skeletons and froze in terror. A huge monster appeared above them. The young man was surprised. What was going on here? Where had this monster come from? It was a swamp dragon. With a single flick of its tongue, it grabbed a fan and swallowed him whole. The swamp dragon was level 40. It was a boss monster, the swamp lizard. The fans were terrified and decided they needed to flee immediately. The protagonist was hiding behind a tree at that moment. The young man would never have thought he might accidentally stumble upon this boss monster. Its nest might be located somewhere nearby. The swamp lizard is a boss monster with a massive health pool, high defense, and powerful attacks. A raid on such a dragon requires a party of at least 20 level 40 players. Even then, victory is far from guaranteed. People said that a raid on the boss monster had just ended. That means this dragon shouldn't be here. However, if someone enters the boss's location with the corresponding quest, the monster will reappear sometime after it was defeated. In other words, if the boss has appeared here, that means Akimbri's quest begins right here. Gurkhan was surprised. Could it be that Akimbri had sent him here to defeat this monster and bring back the egg, even though he was only level 20? Gurkhan thought that was absolutely impossible. Why would Akimbri do that? Fortunately for our hero, he had somehow managed to assemble a suitable team, so perhaps everything would work out. One of the fans shouted that they wouldn't be able to handle the swamp dragon. "We have to run!" Gurkhan couldn't let that happen, so he equipped the skeletons and sent them at those people from the side opposite the dragon. The fans realized their path was cut off. There was no turning back. They'd have to fight their way through. The dragon swiped its tail, striking a fan who was sent flying high into the air. The fans realized that the swamp dragon wouldn't let them just walk away. One of the fans noticed that the necromancer was trying to escape, taking advantage of the chaos. Gurkhan silently thanked these people and thought he would never forget their sacrifice. The protagonist decided that now was the best time to check the dragon's nest. The young man found himself inside the nest, but there were no eggs to be found. Gurkhan searched everywhere because the egg had to be somewhere here. Our hero found a strangely shaped object with some kind of mark glowing on it. Gurkhan pondered for a moment. Could this be a dragon's egg? He had found the most suspicious object, but it looked more like a stone than an egg. The system reported that the skeleton warrior had died. The dragon must have sensed the intruder and was returning to its nest. There was no time left. The dragon, as always, was furious. It looked around, searching for the intruder. The protagonist hid around the corner, and the dragon didn't notice him. The young man miraculously avoided the attack. Gurkhan decided that there was no point in searching the nest with the dragon present. In that case, he had no choice but to take the object with him, even if it wasn't an egg. The group of fans had been wiped out in the swamp. The wounded and dead lay all around. Gurkhan approached one of the young men, saw the watch on his wrist, and crouched down in front of him. Gurkhan asked in surprise, "Could this guy really still be alive?" The protagonist said that Warlord was an interesting game. Naturally, with that much freedom, you couldn't do without freaks. The protagonist took the watch off the injured man's wrist. The wounded young man raised his head and cried out loudly. Gurkhan plunged his blade into the ground in front of his face. Gurkhan said he wanted to make something clear. He had put up with these people for a long time, but now his life depended on this game. Gurkhan warned them only once. They must no longer stand in his way. After that, Gurkhan crossed the swamp, leaping from body to body. He thought that if they continued to chase him after this warning, they would deeply regret it later. The young man decided it was time to make some money. He found the swamp dragon's lair in Lizard Swamp. He could sell its location for 100,000 gold coins. Gurkhan placed a strange object on a Himbri's table and asked, "Is this what you're looking for?" Our hero really hoped this object turned out to be that very egg. The protagonist didn't want to scour the entire map again. A Himbri examined the thing closely. After a while, the mage said that this was exactly what he was looking for. The young man had done an excellent job. A Himbri added that the young man had managed it faster than he'd expected. A Himbri had assumed that someone like this young man would need a lot of time. Gurkhan wondered, why then had this NPC given him such a task? Gurkhan said he'd given it his all, but wanted to take on the next quest. A Himbri asked, did the young man know what this was? Every time they explored the habitats of mutated monsters, they found things like this. A Himbri added that they are called contagion stones. Our hero now understood why those two had been hanging around him. The Plague Stone is an important item related to the main quest. They wanted to make sure that if other participants in the main quest appeared, it wouldn't affect the outcome of their future progress. A Himbri apologized. He knew the task might be too difficult, but all adventurers sometimes have to face an unknown force. It was necessary to test the young man's willpower. A Himbri asked if the young man was ready to fight the plague. The answer was yes. Taking part in the main quest line is a unique opportunity. A Himbri reminded the young man just how powerful the monsters were. He didn't think it necessary to set impossible tasks for a promising newcomer. Gurkhan wondered, could his level really be too low to continue the main quest? A Himbri said that if the young man said, "Oh great mage Himbri, take me as your apprentice," he would agree to train him. Gurkhan left the mage's room. The system announced that the player had completed the quest Egg from the Nest and received a new quest, Training with a Himbri. Gurkhan was forced to say those words, but he was extremely angry at this insolent fellow. The battle was over. The players acknowledged that they had done an excellent job. The bloodthirsty monsters had been destroyed. The player told the captain that their guild had finally achieved something worthwhile. The captain agreed and added that the team could rest. The captain thanked the young man and noted that he had turned out to be stronger than they had thought. Helper, wiping his hands, said there was nothing special about it. Helper added that the squad had done most of the work even without him. The captain noted that without Helper's guidance, they might have suffered casualties, but as it was, they had managed without any losses. He added that he was glad he had hired this man. The team captain held out a bag of money and said he wanted to give it to Helper. Helper said he had been promised something else. The captain explained that this was just a bonus. The young man stated that he was against breaking the contract. The captain was surprised. What's wrong with making a little extra money? Isn't that why the guy became a helper? The squad commander thought it's strange for a ranker like him to take part in a low-level raid. Who is he anyway? Helper declared that he would take whatever he wanted from the nest, just as they had agreed. The squad said there was surely nothing of value in the nest. The helper wasn't listening to him anymore. The young man considered himself lucky. An opportunity had arisen to take the Stone of Contagion. When he found out that the swamp dragon had reappeared, he started to worry. Would the mask of Haho be able to complete the quest? If the dragon was still alive, Haho's mask had most likely failed. You can't defeat a boss monster using only summoned creatures. The mercenary thought that he would take the Stone of Contagion, and Haho's mask would never complete this quest. The mercenary was disappointed. There was nothing in the nest. It turned out someone had beaten him to it. Gurkhan, looking at his smartphone, thought that the time had finally come. He had suffered so much telling himself, if I hold on a little longer, everything will work out. And now it had happened. Gurkhan said that the time had come to put an end to his suffering. The young man declared that he would do it. He would order himself some beef. The protagonist had been trying to save as much as possible on food, but since he'd landed the main quest, everything would be fine. He managed to earn a little money so the young man could afford a small reward. He decided to convert his earnings into real money. However, when the money hit his account, his bills and other debts were paid off. There was almost nothing left in his balance. He couldn't afford to order the beef. The young man was upset. He had worked so hard and in the end he was left with nothing. A message came to his smartphone. Romani asked how the young man was feeling. Had he really left WTube? Our hero had forgotten to tell the girl what was going on. He couldn't film yet because he was being hunted. The protagonist thought, did he really need to fear some nobodies when he was starving to death? After all, he was just a player enjoying the game mechanics. Hirkin decided not to pay attention to anyone. He'll do whatever he wants. After that, our hero, accompanied by skeletons, arrived at the cemetery in the dead of night. The system reported that the player had entered the territory of the Forest of Doom. Hirkin thought that no matter how many times he came here, it was scary every time, as if it were his first time. However, this was the best place to earn experience points. The whole eerie atmosphere was perfect for the video. The protagonist told the skeletons that they were going hunting, but first they would have a new recruit. From now on, magic would be part of their strategy, so they'd better get along with the new skeleton. It was a skeleton mage. He possessed a skill obtained from a Kimbri. The higher the player's skill level, the more advanced spells the skeleton mage would be able to use. Hirkin noted that the skill was cool, but it also consumed a lot of mana. Hirkin said that today they would be hunting a level 33 skeleton. The summoned skeletons were puzzled. Hirkin repeated that this was their enemy. The young man asked why they were standing there. They needed to go and defeat this enemy. The protagonist added that they would soon understand. The undead are different from ordinary monsters. However, the skeletons hid behind the trees and were afraid to even stick their skulls out. Hirkin was surprised. What was going on here? To stop the skeletons from wasting time, they had to act. They had a lot to do, and they needed to go into battle immediately. The enemy frightened the attacker. The young man realized that ordinary attacks wouldn't work here. The mage's hammer, a rare artifact, was activated. Hirkin struck the enemy with the hammer and sent him flying far to the side. He said it was a pretty good hit. The protagonist added that the enemy needed to have its head knocked off. The summoned skeletons were frightened and clutched their skulls. Hirkin explained today's objective: to destroy 100 skeletons in 100 minutes. The protagonist warned that if they failed, he would leave them here to rot. After those words, the task was completed. The young man said the job had been done splendidly. Our hero thought the summoned skeletons would need more time to get used to weapons they had never used before, but they handled it better than expected. The battle of bones and sticks proved effective. The video is ready. All that's left is to contact Romani. Suddenly, a huge skeleton appeared. A level 35 skeleton warrior. Hirkin thought it was a rare monster that randomly appeared in this spot. He ordered the skeletons to attack this monster, since it was a sure sign of beef. To cook steaks, which is better, frying them or baking them? The young man thought that a stew would work too. The protagonist thought this was really scary. He hadn't really done anything yet, but he'd already nearly died. Fortunately, his first target was the monster's arm. Now it would be harder for the monster to fight back. Hirkin activated his hammer and said he wanted to test the bone crusher. Swinging his hammer, our hero began to approach his opponent. The task was completed. None of the summoned skeletons were harmed. Hirkin said that it was much easier than he had expected. Suddenly, a huge tongue of flame appeared. The protagonist noted that the monster was quite impatient. The skeleton mage, using fire magic, put up a decent fight. The system reported that the skeleton warrior had been destroyed and experience points had been earned. The young man thought this video should get at least 10,000 views. Our hero's appetite was truly whetted. He decided it would be best to grill some beef. The system reported that the location's boss had sensed the death of his subordinate, detected the intruders, and was awakening. A huge location boss with a crown on its head appeared before our hero and his summoned skeletons. The young man was disheartened when he realized that this boss monster was a level 40 golden lich. This is the boss of the Forest of the Dead, a top-tier magical unit that obliterates all living things with magic. A powerful boss, also known as the Bane of Newbies. The condition for its awakening was the destruction of a multitude of skeletons. The protagonist hadn't even thought about this before. There was no guarantee that the young man would be able to defeat it, but if he succeeded, he would definitely hit the jackpot. Our hero's plan was this: if he buffed his skeletons to the max, everything might work out. However, the summoned creatures were recalled due to a lack of mana. Hirkin thought it was a complete failure. He realized he had summoned 4 skeletons, then forced the skeleton mage to cast spells. No wonder his mana had run out so quickly. There was no choice. The young man decided it was time for him to step up and do his part before he got completely rusty. The slot was activated. The protagonist put on his gear and prepared to attack. Now everything depended solely on him. Hirkin closed in on the boss monster and declared that the dance was about to begin. The confrontation was fierce. The young man realized he was facing the bane of newbies. The protagonist noted that at this rate, he wouldn't stand a chance of winning. The monster continued to press his opponent. Hirkin swung his hammer and said he had only one choice. He had to stop this monster. He decided to strike at the monster's arms. Without arms, the monster wouldn't be able to cast spells. Our hero declared that this was his chance to rip the monster's arms off one by one. The monster continued to cast spells, launching energy attacks at his opponent. Dark magic spread in all directions, preventing the young man from getting close. The rate at which the dark mana was generated increased. Hirkin decided to retreat far enough so that the boss monster's attacks wouldn't hit him. There was an explosion. The protagonist was thrown far forward by the blast and lost his balance. Our hero couldn't recall a battle like this before. The consequences could have been catastrophic. Hirkin surmised that the Golden Lich had hidden abilities, or that, like with the Minotaur, a balance patch had been applied to it. The young man said he didn't know and couldn't remember. He hadn't touched these bones in about 2 years. The protagonist couldn't rely on his skeletons for help, and he had no useful knowledge about the boss's behavior. How could he defeat this thing? Hirkin decided he would try everything he could. It had to work. Now the young man knew his opponent's attack pattern and could dodge them. The only problem was that he had little time for a good counterattack. He needed to find a weak spot and attack effectively. The protagonist made a mistake and found himself in the clutches of the Golden Lich. He had never been this close to losing before. Hirkin wondered how many new patterns of behavior his opponent had. Now he had to get out of here. Our hero activated the curse. Demon's Curse. The target's stats dropped. Now the young man found an opportunity to counterattack. The Lich lost his balance and fell onto his back. Hirkin didn't lose his composure and instantly counterattacked him. The counterattack was successful. Some parts of the Golden Lich's skull were shattered by the impact. Hirkin reasonably concluded that the boss monster had been defeated. The system reported that the player had destroyed the Golden Lich. Experience points in the title Skeleton Slayer were awarded. Hirkin deactivated the slot and removed his equipment. The protagonist said he had been on the verge of defeat. Our hero reached level 36, increasing his strength and stamina. The protagonist realized that if he continued in the same vein, he might face health issues, which would be extremely dangerous. Until now, our hero had relied on his knowledge and rapid leveling. Now he had more skills, which meant he needed more mana. Hirkin thought he had leveled up his skeletons very well. But what's the point if he can't summon them for long? Our hero has earned every mana-related title he could. He'll have to think about gear, but he doesn't have enough money yet. Hirkin decided that for now, he would just send the video for editing. He also needed to focus on reaching level 40. Romani, watching the video, kept the image paused. The girl replayed the clip over and over for a long time. Romani couldn't help herself. This guy was definitely going to drive her crazy. Not only did he defeat a boss of a higher level, but he didn't take a single hit. How did he manage to pull that off without any practice? A true talent. Romani said that the raw video was already amazing. There wouldn't even be much editing to do. Just make a preview, and it's ready to send. The girl decided to call him the king of solo leveling. The Raider Association branch, Bansu Castle. Our hero said he'd return stronger, just as the mage had predicted. Akimbri looked at the young man and wondered, what kind of den had he crawled out of? Hirkin said he had come for his reward. Akimbri said the reward was waiting for the young man and handed him a book. The system reported that the mission was complete and the skeletologist's skill book had been obtained. Hirkin realized he was holding an ultra-rare necromancer skill. It was priceless. This was exactly what the hero needed to reduce his mana consumption. Akimbri also handed the young man the Ring of Contagion. It had been crafted using the Stone of Contagion that the young man had brought. The Ring of Contagion was a unique item with special properties. Hirkin thought that this was precisely the rare ring awarded to the first players to complete the main questline. Akimbri unexpectedly said he couldn't just give the ring away. The mage challenged the young man to catch him if he could. Hirkin wondered why things had to be so complicated and told Akimbri to run away immediately, or else he would be destroyed. Gurkhan stopped outside the city and thought that something was off about this crazy old man. He would have been killed long ago if he weren't an NPC. Could this really be the great mage? Our hero still managed to get the ring in the next quest. Akimbri said he'd suddenly lost contact with an agent named Miggy and that the young man should pay a visit to Suryu Castle. The protagonist thought he'd let him go just this once. It's best not to venture into Suryu Castle at a low level. He'll have to level up on the way there. A message was received from Romina. The girl had just uploaded a video featuring the lich to WTube. The guy should check it out for himself. The video has racked up a crazy number of views, over 2 million. Gurkhan began to watch his account balance intently. He couldn't tear his eyes away. The account showed a number with 8 zeros. Was this really not a dream? The young man couldn't contain himself. A tomahawk steak, ribeye, filet mignon, strip loin. Gurkhan couldn't believe his luck. Now he could try so many things. The young man thought this was a real jackpot. He knew the video would go viral, but he hadn't expected this much. Gurkhan thought it wasn't the right time. He needed to log out. The connection was lost. The protagonist read the message and realized they wanted to accept him into the Thunder Hunters Guild, where Che Solyan was a member. In his past life, they hadn't given him a chance. The girl had told him to join her team. Gurkhan thought history was repeating itself. He was being invited into the guild again. He declared that he would not join the Thunder Hunters. That would never happen. The young man remembered that he had said the same thing last time. He used to wonder, why was she so persistent after so many rejections, since he was already a member of another guild? The player said that was really cool. The Thunder Hunters were one of the best guilds, ranked in the top 30. The guild leader is a girl from a wealthy family. If he joins the guild, a high salary is guaranteed. It makes perfect sense that they're recruiting talent. Matador said that this young man is insanely good at the game. In all the videos, they only feature him and praise him. Gurkhan said that a big salary or anything else doesn't interest him. He won't join the Thunder Hunters. They'll make a fortune on their own once they become famous. He doesn't want to give up halfway through what he started. Gurkhan said he's ready to work for his own guild. Gurkhan thought that even back then, it had been worth it to stab him in the back. The guy understood that trivial money was definitely not what mattered right now. He had plenty of work, and there was simply no point in rejoicing over small victories. He uses this money because his goals are much grander. The young man told the summoned skeletons that he had killed the boss monster on his own. The protagonist explained that his skeletons needed to train more. After all, they had to become stronger. He couldn't let what had happened happen again. The player noticed that everyone was tired and asked if Jaehyun wanted to relax a little. Do they really need to work this hard? But they aren't like him. The protagonist replied that this time, everything would be different. Gurkhan declared that they would become the strongest. The young man told the skeletons that their next target would be Suryu Castle. They would train along the way. The training itself was simple. They would run the whole way. Gurkhan swung his club and said that whoever fell would have to pick up their own bones. Swinging his club, the boy charged at the skeletons, who, terrified, began to flee from him. The girl asked Lady Sir, who was sitting atop the slain monsters, what she was thinking about. Hatch, a member of the Thunder Hunters Guild, said that a meeting would be held soon. Sir jumped down and asked how the investigation into the plague quest was going. Hatch replied, "Nothing new yet. They still haven't found the key to unlock the next quest." Sir said she couldn't believe that Hydra had started the main quest line before them. It was very humiliating. Hatch added that everything would work out soon. After all, they were heading to a meeting of the leaders of the top 30 guilds. Hatch also advised the guild leader to be careful at the meeting. The video King of Solo Leveling racked up over 2 million views. It became a real hit. In just one night, the protagonist earned a huge amount of money. However, things didn't go as he had planned. The young man thought he was close to his dream. He believed he could now afford many things. But keeping his composure was extremely difficult. However, thanks to those who had put him in this situation, a thirst for revenge ignited within him, driving him to take drastic action. Where did he start? Gurkhan said he had brought enough money to pay off the principal amount, including interest. The protagonist handed over the stacks of cash and said that everything was now settled. He had paid off his debt in full. The next step was to buy rare skill books. Thus, our hero found himself broke again. His account balance was 0. Gurkhan thought he was prepared for this, but seeing the lack of money was almost physically painful. The skeletons were understanding. Gurkhan decided he should take his mind off things and study the new skills he had acquired. The system reported that the player had mastered the skill Skin Sculpting. This is a passive skill that strengthens the body by attaching monster remains to the skin. The young man couldn't wait to test this defensive skill. Hirkin agreed to use the Skeleton Warrior's Horn for reinforcement. The system reported that the player had acquired the abilities of a skeleton warrior. Defense increased. An energy sword appeared in his hand. Swings of the sword showed that it possessed excellent capabilities. The skeletons were frightened, and the young man said it was magnificent, almost better than he had expected. The system reported that the player has mastered the Curse of Sloth skill. This skill reduces the target's movement speed. The protagonist tested the skill on one of the skeletons and said it would definitely come in handy in battle. The last skill was Summon Golem. This was the skill our hero wanted most of all. It wasn't easy to obtain. Everything around him shook, and the stones began to move. Hirkin said that he had finally summoned it. A huge stone golem appeared before the young man. Even for a necromancer, golems are a must-have. That's exactly why he decided this bruiser would be tougher than any tank. Hirkin told the golem to activate copy mode. Now all actions must be repeated. Hirkin raised his fist to strike. The golem repeated the movement. The young man said that this golem had a copy mode that could be used to synchronize movements. Combining the golem's strength with its movements can be incredibly effective. The young man struck with a shadow blow. The copy didn't work. The golem didn't budge. This seemed very surprising to the hero. What was wrong here? Hirkin was furious. Why wasn't copy mode working? He began to repeat incessantly that this was definitely a bug. After a while, the golem repeated the young man's movements. The protagonist was discouraged. Was this really the limit of his speed? The golem's movements were confident, but extremely slow. Hirkin wondered what he was supposed to do with this, and what practical use he could find for it. The young man, furious, clutched his head and shouted that this was a very nasty game. After a while, the golem repeated his movement. The chairwoman announced that the meeting would begin once everyone was in their seats. Nergal, the leader of the Ares Guild, thanked everyone for taking the time to attend despite their busy schedules. Matador Cheb laughed and said he saw some familiar faces. It was the leader of the Red Bulls Guild. Berg, the leader of the Fang Guild, was also present. Queen of Thunder Sir, leader of the Thunder Hunters Guild, also attended the meeting. Berg said that 29 people had been invited, but only 4 had shown up. What a surprise. Matador replied that even more than necessary had come. For everyone to gather, something incredible must happen. Usually the top 30 warlord guilds fiercely oppose one another. Nergal said there was no need for such large-scale gatherings. However, the fact is that the Hydra Guild has identified the infected count. They are planning a raid on the boss in a month. Matador said this information was enough to drive anyone mad. The others hadn't even come close to figuring it out. If it's true, the Hydra Guild will pull off a massive raid. Berg was furious and said that it would all be over if they let Hydra get to the count. The main storyline would end up in their hands the very next moment. Content, sponsors, they'd take it all. Seer told Berg to shut up. If he was scared of the competition, he should go hide. He shouldn't make her angry. Berg got angry. Did the Queen of Thunder really want to die? Matador told everyone to calm down. After all, they hadn't gathered here to fight. Nergal added that Cheb was right. These squabbles would only play into Hydra's hands. Nergal suggested that everyone unite against Hydra. The 4 guilds have gathered here today to agree on a non-aggression pact until the story of the infected count is resolved. They will share all information regarding this quest that comes into their possession. Matador said he wasn't a fan of such alliances, but they didn't have much of a choice. If they didn't stand in Hydra's way, no one would. After the meeting, Seer stood in the shower stall and thought it was a disgrace. They couldn't even handle the first boss without outside help. They're forced to band together, but there's nothing they can do about it now. If they let them get through the main storyline first, it'll be a total failure. Sir thought she'd have to bite the bullet and wait for the right opportunity. The girl made a phone call and gave orders to all guild members. Keep a close eye on the Hydra and report any strange behavior on their part. Siri said that the infected count must be theirs at any cost. The Raider Association's branch, Bansu Castle. Hirkin was surprised when he heard the news. His interlocutor repeated that he was asking him to go to the Bobaru Forest. Agent Miggy had gone missing in that forest. They needed to search the area for clues. Hirkin said that the Bobaru Forest was teeming with level 70 monsters. It was an extremely dangerous place. If you went in there, you wouldn't survive. The man said that was exactly why he was asking a Himbri's apprentice to go there. If Gurkhan refuses, he will lose his status as a plague seeker. Recalling this conversation, our hero was extremely upset. What should he do now? The next mission was called In Search of Miggy. He had to find the missing agent Miggy, who was tracking the Stones of Contagion, and continue his work. Gurkhan thought that if he lost his status as a plague seeker, he would be kicked out of the main storyline. Why make things so complicated? The protagonist figured he'd bitten off more than he could chew when he decided to get involved in the main quest line. It was nothing but trouble. Under normal circumstances, the young man wouldn't have been able to complete all these quests as a novice, but so far he had somehow managed to get through them. But now he had been tasked with going to the Bobaru Forest. It was a level 60 quest with an elimination condition. Gurkhan didn't know what to do. After all, he couldn't just refuse the main quest. The protagonist asked his companion if Hydra could complete the main storyline. The other top guilds were having trouble even getting started on it. What would happen to the main story quest for the others if the infected count were defeated? Gurkhan decided that he would have to go to the Bobaru Forest after all. Watching the castle through binoculars, the young people concluded that everything was quiet. Their mission was almost over. Sitting here every day and watching the castle for hours on end was simply maddening. Nital, the 8th commander of the Hydra Guild, kept looking through his binoculars. He wondered what reward they would get for the Count's head. After all, Hydra would definitely take first place in the rankings. Nital said they shouldn't get ahead of themselves. The commander added that their colleagues weren't done yet. For now, they were doing their part by keeping watch on the Count's castle. They couldn't let their guard down or allow any information to leak. A professional must remain a professional. Another player ran up to the young people. He shouted that he had found Nital from Hydra. It was Kim's, a member of the Red Bulls Guild and a third-ranked player. He greeted them and said it had been a long time since they'd seen each other. Nital asked what the Red Bulls were doing here. Kim said he'd come to take care of this mountain's boss. He's at a decent level. Isn't that why these two are here? Nital couldn't tell the truth and said they had the same goal as Kim's. Kim's asked Nital, "Why does he have such a sour expression on his face? Is he really distracting the guy to go to the bathroom?" Kim's added that there's nothing shameful about that. Kim's turned around and said he was leaving and wouldn't bother Nital. Nital shouted that Kim's had misunderstood everything. Kim's contacted headquarters and reported that the 8th commander of Hydra was here. It seemed the information had been confirmed. Matador Cheb and his companion were surprised to hear this news. It was information from an anonymous source about the location of the infection count. The girl was sure it was just a hoax, though they had sent Kim's to verify the data just in case. The girl said that they had been given such important information anonymously and for free. What was the source after? Matador suggested that there might be a mole within Hydra itself. Kim said they weren't in a position to choose right now. Hydra could take everything away from them. Kim suggested engaging in battle to buy some time. Matador said they shouldn't do that. If this really is the infected Count's castle, most of Hydra is concentrated there right now. The guild leader said they couldn't afford to lose an elite fighter at a time like this. Kim said the commander was flattering him. A powerful explosion rang out. Matador and his companion grew alarmed. What had happened there? With his hands raised, Kim said that they weren't the only ones who had received such information. Kim's added that the princess from the Thunder Hunters was here too. Thunder, the enormous bear, unleashed all his fury on the stone golem, raising a defensive block in front of him. In response, the golem attacked the bear, as always, unhurriedly. The bear stood with its paws lowered, waiting for the golem to finish its strike. The skeletons had been watching this process for quite some time. The skeletons had grabbed some popcorn and 3D glasses, settling comfortably on a log. The protagonist sat down on a branch of a nearby tree and pondered for a long time. The young man wondered why it was so quiet. He was sure he had sent out the scam plan. Why was there no response? The protagonist realized that the only way to solve this problem without entering the Boboru Forest was to forcefully complete the quest. The main storyline in Warlord consists of many chapters. The first chapter, The Infected Count, is currently in full swing. Once the Count is defeated, the chapter will automatically end, along with all the quests associated with it. Gurkhan, the young man, said he didn't care who did it. Someone had to go and finish him off, so he sent out the information to many guilds, with the exception of the Solyon Guild. Why aren't they responding? The stone golem began to crumble, losing its balance in the process. The huge bear attacked the golem once again. Gurkhan got tired of watching this and punched the bear in the head. The young man told the bear to finally calm down. Gurkhan noticed that he was watching a stream, and the bear was distracting him. The golem, with its arms torn off, stood to the side while the bear was activated. Representatives of Hydra appeared on screen and greeted the viewers. The knight said that they were the first to uncover the Count's identity, and as a result, were planning a raid on this boss. The date has already been set. A representative of Hydra announced that the raid would begin in 3 days. Gurkhan said that this was sooner than he expected, but he wasn't surprised. Everything was going according to plan. The protagonist laughed. He couldn't have hoped for anything better. It's just perfect. The bear and the golem clashed in hand-to-hand combat. Gurkhan said that 3 days from now is very soon. The young man surmised that they were scared because he had sent the information to other guilds. Knowing Hydra, our hero had nothing to worry about. It was no coincidence that they had advanced further than the others along the main storyline. They had many experienced players. As soon as the main quest is completed, the headache will be over. That will happen in just 3 days. However, disaster struck. All members of the Hydra Guild were defeated. The young man watched the corresponding video. His expression changed. The protagonist threw his smartphone on the floor and shouted that they were mocking him. If they wanted to finish the quest so quickly, they should have at least prepared properly. Why did they even go there if they were deactivated within an hour? Gurkhan assumed he had simply overestimated them. That meant he'd have to look for other options. A message popped up on his smartphone saying that the Red Bulls Guild had started a live stream. Our hero thought that the Red Bulls was the very guild led by Matador Cheb. Gurkhan couldn't believe his eyes again. The location was being restored. The knight asked the scouts if they had seen what had happened. They faced a powerful enemy, strong enough to destroy even the Hydra Guild. Their resources were very limited, and their chances of success were slim. The guild members unanimously supported their commander, reacting wildly with shouts and the swinging of swords. The players continued to shout the guild's name, Red Bulls, for a long time. Gurkhan was surprised. Did they really want to start right now? Matador said he wanted to introduce an ally who had joined them on this raid. It was the leader of the Thunder Hunters Guild, Thunder Queen Sir. Our hero saw Che Sol Yeon on the screen. Matador Cheb, sitting by the campfire during a rest stop, said that this was quite unexpected. He never would have thought that the Queen of Thunder herself would seek a meeting with him. Matador asked, "Could it be that the Thunder Hunters have decided to declare war on us?" Sire replied that this was not the case. They were allies now. Matador pointed out that they had severely beaten one of his men, hinting at Kim's. Sir said that wasn't true. That's just how they greet each other. Sire said she wanted to get down to business and asked if Matador really had valuable information about the infected Count. Cheb said he had absolutely no idea what she was talking about. Sir declared she had no time for games. She knew that some people from the top 30 guilds had received information about the infected Count's location. Sol Yeon added that, since they were so far removed from this questline as a whole, only a fool wouldn't have figured it out. Matador said that Sir was really cornering him, but she was absolutely right. They didn't know who exactly had given this hint. Sir said that in that case she had one more question. Would the Hydra Guild be able to handle it? Matador replied that he wasn't sure. They'll fail. Sir said that they want to be first so badly that they even rushed this raid. But the infected Count is the first story boss. Defeating him will be very difficult. They would have a better chance if they let other guilds test their strength and gather information. Matador was certain that Sir wasn't here to discuss Hydra's chances of success. What did she want then? The girl jabbed her sword sharply into the ground near her companion's feet. Sire proposed joining forces for a raid on the Count. Sir added that she was willing to cede the honor of being the first to destroy the Count. Matador thought she was bluffing. As expected, she knew how to negotiate. An agreement was reached. The joint raid was approved. In the battle against the monsters, Sir demonstrated her outstanding abilities. The infected Count, the final boss of the first chapter of the main quest, said that wasn't bad for such pathetic scum. The infected Count added that he would now crush these opponents into dust. The monster was determined. The players shouted that the monsters were advancing and that they had to fight nonstop. The odds were stacked against them. The humans were nearly at their limit. Sir said there was no end to them. The invasion continued. Matador Cheb appeared before Sir and said he would take on these monsters himself and clear a path for the Queen of Thunder. Sir told Matador to deal with the boss. The girl leaped high into the air, swung her blade, and said that now it would all be over. However, the infected count sending his tentacles through the ground pierced the attacking girl with them. Even in her current state, the Queen of Thunder managed to sever the infected count's tentacles. Matador Cheb said that only the Queen of Thunder, Sir, was capable of such a feat. Matador declared that this girl was even more terrifying than he had previously imagined. The system reported that the Red Bulls and the Thunder Hunters had defeated the infected count. Looking at his smartphone, our hero saw that Sol Yeon had defeated the boss of this location. The young man was disappointed but said it didn't matter. In any case, he just wanted someone to defeat the boss. It didn't matter who exactly. The protagonist added that Sol Yeon could enjoy her victory while she had the chance. This boss was the last one she would face. Hirkin said that in the end, he would be the only winner. The Balkas Mountains. The young man said his name was Jae-hun. His in-game nickname was Hirkin. He had been reborn by some miracle. He dreamed of becoming the strongest in the game and taking revenge on all the scoundrels who had cheated him in his past life. The young man didn't understand why nothing but trouble happened to him every day. At that moment, he and his skeletons were running for their lives from boar monsters. A few hours earlier, the protagonist and his skeletons had finally reached the block zone. The young man realized that a restricted zone lay before him. This would continue until the conditions for opening it were met. Hirkin touched the portal and realized it wasn't that easy to get through. However, the young man already knew that the second chapter of the main quest began in the Balkas Mountains. Therefore, as soon as the first chapter was completed, the barrier would automatically drop and the passage would open. That is exactly what happened. The system reported that the player had entered the Balkas Mountains. The player received the title First Explorer of the Balkas Mountains. The young man had suspected as much. No human had ever set foot here before. Hirkin told the skeletons to follow him. It was time to shine. Now the young man wasn't running away from boar monsters. The leader was a level 60 wild boar, a ferocious monster that preferred to hunt in a pack. Hirkin, a level 41 character, was ready to fearlessly charge at this monster. The monsters growled viciously, baring their huge fangs. The young man thought this was some kind of curse. Only he could have stumbled upon boars after taking just a few steps in the mountains. Someone might have already guessed that this restricted zone had opened. There was no time to waste. The odds were slim, but he had to at least try. Hirkin decided he needed to come up with a plan and ordered the skeletons to put on their battle helmets. The boars were merciless and trampled the monsters, scattering their bones in all directions. The system reported that the skeleton warrior had been destroyed as a result of sustaining significant damage. Hirkin noted that this had been done with a single blow. Hirkin said it was simply a glitch. The curse of laziness. The monsters were more enraged than ever, for the young man had stopped them, rendering them immobile. Hirkin told the monsters that they wouldn't be able to run away now. They would remain in place for a while. The protagonist activated his energy sword and said he would do things differently now. It was time to make them pay for breaking his skeleton. The young man took a running start and fell to the ground. He had slipped on a banana peel. Behind the hero, a beast sat in a tree and laughed loudly. It was a level 50 armored monkey, a monster that loved to mock its prey. Hirkin shouted that he would destroy this armored monkey. The effect of the curse of laziness ended, and the boars regained their mobility. Hirkin noticed this and said that the situation was very bad. The monsters approached the hero, but were immediately attacked by an arrow fired at them. The hero was surprised and saw a man in a tree with a crossbow in his hand. The man continued to shoot at the target. Hirkin looked at the boars and said that this archer was taking them down with a single arrow. The archer approached the hero and asked if the young man was injured. Suryu Castle, the town square. The place was bustling with activity. The players looked at the young man and were amazed. Could he really be wearing a full set of white mamba armor? That's incredibly expensive. This man was definitely a high ranker, but he hadn't been seen here before. The young man asked his companion if Michelle had discovered the identity of the person who had shared this information with the guilds. The girl replied that none of them possessed such information. Michelle noted that this was obvious. They were talking about a person who knew the identity of the infected count, yet had willingly shared this information for free. How were they even supposed to find him? The young man asked if anything pointed to Haho's mask. Michelle replied that he had only uploaded a regular hunting video, apparently of giant bears. There's no way a newbie who's just started the main storyline could be behind all this. Michelle asked who the ranker was going to help now. The young man replied that he was currently interested in the cleanup guild. Michelle said they could only dream of peace. The guy noted that for a while he'd be focusing on his helper duties. She had to find the person they were looking for. The young man didn't know who they were looking for, but that person must be held accountable for disrupting the balance of this world. The archer asked the hero if he was a student of Akimbri. The young man confirmed it. The protagonist would never have imagined that he would run into Mavun himself, the key NPC of the second chapter of the main storyline. The man said that the young man was lucky since he had stumbled upon him while making his rounds. Although Mavun is quite experienced and had even been the prince's fencing instructor in the past, he was expelled because of a single unfortunate incident. After that, he became captain of the Rangers defending the Balkans Mountains. This is the very NPC the hero had been hoping to meet. He realized this would save him a lot of time. Mavun said the young man must return. Mavun added that he didn't know what had brought the young man here, but there was nothing in this place but monsters. The young man should go back to where he came from before anything bad happens to him. Hirkin said that the infected count was already dead. The protagonist realized there was no need to try so hard to get what he wanted. The young man already knew how to get to the rewards of the second chapter. He added that infected monsters were still roaming the area. Hirkin explained that he wanted to find out why this investigation had led him here. Mavun replied that he had one theory, though there was no evidence yet. Mavun asked the young man if he would help gather this evidence. The system announced that the player had earned the title, First to Meet the Ranger of the Balkans Mountains. All stats have been increased. The player also earned the title Initiator. The young man was happy, having received 2 rare titles. He liked this questline. Hirkin told his companion that he would help in any way he could. Where should he start? Mavun told the young man to start by studying the monsters in this area. This was a quest from Ranger Mavun. He needed to destroy the monsters in the Balkans Mountains. Hirkin left the room and said that he had actually been planning to continue his development in self-improvement. He decided to leave high-level monsters, such as wild boars and bear warriors, for later. He needed to start with something simpler. The hero remembered the monkey and realized it was first on the list. A player walking by slipped on a banana peel in the exact same spot. The next time, another player took the same fall. The situation repeated itself over and over. The monkey continued to taunt and laugh. Another player appeared at that spot, a girl armed with a dagger. The monkey prepared a banana peel and swung to throw it at the girl's feet. Suddenly, the protagonist appeared nearby and said that the monkey's fun was over. The young man landed several blows on the monster. The monkey was sent flying far backward. Regrouping, the monkey regained its balance and began to retreat, leaping from branch to branch. Hirkin thought that this monster was very noisy. Besides, the tree branches were getting in the way of a proper attack. The hero drew his dagger and threw it at the monkey. The monkey looked back when it saw the dagger and changed its course. The dagger flew past and stuck into a tree near the monkey. The monkey smirked, thinking it had easily escaped pursuit. The young man said that the dagger had been merely a diversion. At that very moment, the monkey was stunned. A stone golem smashed the tree she was sitting on with a powerful punch. The blow was so strong that the monkey was sent flying far to the side by the shockwave and fell to the ground. The system announced that the player had earned the title, First to Defeat the Armored Monkey. Hirkin said that was great. This way, they could catch other monkeys too. Journalists and cameramen filmed the victorious players standing before them. They were the leaders of the Matador and Sire guilds. Everyone congratulated Chibu and Sire on their successful raid on the first chapter's boss. A reporter asked if the Queen of Thunder would like to say a few words. Sire said they'd been very lucky this time. However, they would continue to work hard to deliver good results in the future. Hayes said that Miss Sir really was the best. She thought they wouldn't make it when the final wave of monsters hit. But then the clan leader charged forward and single-handedly took down the infected count. The girl remarked that she had simply been lucky. Sire added that they wouldn't have succeeded if it weren't for the Red Bulls. Sire thought that for absolute superiority, they needed that man's skills. She was referring to Haho's mask. Sire suggested that Haho contact Hatch. Her companion was surprised. Why would the lady need that loser? The armored monkey was destroyed. At the same time, the equipment's durability dropped to 0. The young man thought the equipment had reached its limit. An upgrade was necessary. The problem was that the hero didn't have the money for it. The only option left was to go after gems. Monster gems are crystals that can drop from monsters with an extremely low chance. Gems are used to craft items. The green goblin gem increases agility. The blue werewolf gem increases attack. Gems grant equipment, additional effects depending on the monster they drop from. Gems dropped by armored monkeys are excellent for crafting equipment. Hirkin said he was ready to exterminate every single monkey. 9 hours passed. Not a single gem was obtained. Countless monkeys had been destroyed, yet the result was 0. The protagonist hadn't even managed to get a single crystal. The young man hoped he might be just one step away from the stone, but it was an illusion. A red knight emerged from the forest and asked, "Is that the mask of Haho before me?" Hirkin sized up the knight from head to toe. He was wearing expensive dragon armor. The protagonist remembered those two people and thought, as long as he isn't from their group. The knight introduced himself. His name is Kiat. Kiat said he was challenging the young man to a duel. Kiat suggested that if he defeated the Haho mask, he would instantly become popular. That was his main goal. Hirkin realized he was dealing with a typical loser seeking attention. The protagonist said he was very busy right now and was about to leave. Our hero was in a bad mood. He hadn't found any gems, and now this crazy guy was hanging on his coattails. Kiat asked the young man to stop. The Red Knight promised the Haho mask 5,000 gold coins if he fought him. Kiat said he was a hero of justice. As he spoke, he performed a few pirouettes. At least that's how it used to be. However, in Warlord, no one paid any attention to him. Kiat called himself a hero. He had just posted a video and was asking everyone to subscribe to his channel. At that moment, Maska Haho was also posting a video. When Kiat was angry at this guy, they started uploading videos at about the same time, and now nobody cares about Kiat. Kiat saw a person in the clearing and realized that this was the very same Haho mask. Kiat immediately decided to carry out his plan and steal this man's glory. Kiat made his proposal. To fight for money, Hirkin was surprised. What was this guy thinking? Even if he's proposing a duel for money, why strip down to his underwear? Kiat replied that it was to keep things fair. Kiat had heard that Haho the masked man's weapon was broken, so he couldn't fight. Kiat added that he wanted a fair one-on-one duel. Otherwise, people might say he only won because of his gear. Kiat suggested that the masked Haho give it his all right now. The knight said that was enough talk and lunged at the protagonist. Hirkin didn't want to fight a naked man, but he had no choice. The hero was forced to dodge to avoid the attack. Kiat activated the stimulator skill and pounced on his opponent with even greater aggression. The knight Kiat wanted to defeat this opponent and show everyone that he was better. Hirkin dodged another attack, grabbed a handful of dirt, and threw it into his opponent's eyes. The hero, with another blow from Haho's mask, Kiat was knocked out and slammed into a tree. Kiat lost because his principles mattered more to him than victory. Nabok skin sculpture. Item, armored monkey hide. Kiat thought that if he let this blow land, he would surely die. Hirkin said that his opponent had started this himself, so there was no point in denying it. Kiat raised his hands and told the masked Haho to stop. He was surrendering. Tears welled up in the knight's eyes. Hirkin struck the tree nearby and broke the trunk. Kiat admitted that it had been very scary. He had even forgotten that he was inside the game. Hirkin said that if he had won, a reward awaited him. 5,000 gold coins. Kiat took off his knight's mask and said that his opponent was really cool. Kiat repeated that Haho's mask was incredibly powerful. He couldn't even believe it. Kiat said he conceded defeat. At the same time, a bag of money appeared in his palm. He added that this was the gold he had promised. Kiat also held out his sword as a sign of respect to the victor. Hirkin was delighted. It was the sword of the orc hero. It grants bonuses to strength and stamina and ignores armor. At auction, such a sword could fetch around 15,000 gold coins. Was Kiat really giving this sword away? Hirkin asked why the young man was doing this. Kiat replied that it was a token of gratitude. The knight said he had been too blinded by his thirst for glory and had completely forgotten that he needed to become stronger himself. The mask of Haho helped him realize this. Kiat added that this guy was truly worthy of being recognized as his brother. Hirkin thought that was a strange reason. He kicked his opponent and told him to step aside. Hirkin turned to the skeletons and told them to deal with this guy. A short while later, the young man was tied to a cross and shouted that his full name was Don Kiat. He would return when he became worthy of being called this man's brother. Kiat added that he would eagerly await that meeting. Hirkin didn't want to hear any more of it and left the area. Our hero agreed that this madman, whoever he was really going all out in this game. He's a champ. Gherkin said he had acquired a very good sword, which meant he no longer needed to hunt armored monkeys. Our hero decided that this should be enough to move on to the next task. Gherkin wondered if he should destroy hundreds of armored monkeys after all. This time, crystals are sure to drop. The skeletons tried to hold their master back, but he insisted that this time he would be lucky. He could just feel it. The orc hero's sword is a rare artifact that increases strength and stamina and ignores armor. The man held the player cards in his hands. 950 armored monkeys, 104 saber-toothed wolves, 76 poisonous lizards were also destroyed. Mavoon said it was excellent work. Thanks to the young man, the investigation was proceeding smoothly. The hunter asked the young man what was on his mind. Gherkin replied that he was just daydreaming about how he would spend the money he had earned. Mavin added that now the young man must listen carefully because the next mission would be particularly dangerous. There was a map on the hunter's table. Mavoon pointed to a spot and said that a warrior bear had been spotted here, on the mountain near the peak. The warrior bear was about 4 meters tall, clad in armor, just like a man. Mavoon said that if the young man could find out where they got their gear, it would be a huge help in the investigation. The protagonist asked again, "So the hunter wants him to kill one of them and bring their gear back here?" Mavoon asked if the young man could handle it alone. Even a ranger sometimes finds it difficult to fight one-on-one. Gherkin replied that he could handle it. Our hero added that he already knew how to defeat them. The young man approached the foot of the mountain, checked his map, and realized he was somewhere nearby. Our hero said it was time to flex a little. He activated the slot. The system reported that the player had opened the auction window. Here he could compete for lots with other users. Gherkin checked the information and said that, at his current level, the best he could afford was the skeleton snake set. The system confirmed the purchase of the set. Our hero equipped himself. Now he also had gloves from the skeleton snake set. Gherkin decided to use his remaining funds to buy skill books available for his level. Our hero understood that he still wasn't quite up to the level of a bear warrior. The protagonist looked back and saw skeletons with sad expressions on their faces. They wanted equipment too. Gherkin said he had completely forgotten about them and checked to see what might be suitable for the skeletons. However, he didn't have enough money left. Gherkin turned around and told the skeletons that he had no more money. The summoned skeletons fell into sadness. The protagonist felt ashamed. Gherkin promised that as soon as he acquired the funds, he would spend them on the skeletons right away. Wild monster boars appeared behind the young man. The young man decided he could make some money by hunting these boars. The skeletons, having armed themselves, immediately rushed into the attack. The young man thought these monsters had appeared at just the right time. The skeletons were jealous of his gear. After a while, only one boar remained alive. Gherkin told the skeletons not to delay and to finish it off. He would buy them gear along the way. The skeletons didn't have time to do anything. The boar had been killed by other forces. The young man was surprised. What was that? He looked back and saw strangers. They asked, "Who is this guy hunting here without permission?" This area belongs to the Apollo Guild. Our hero saw 3 people and thought they were just another bunch of nuisances. The strangers introduced themselves, Wang Chang, Li Chang, and Il Chang, the great trio of the Apollo Guild. Gherkin said he understood everything and deactivated this Rio. The young man noted that they shouldn't have gotten cocky with such meager skills. Our hero wondered, was he really a magnet for all kinds of evil? He'd have to talk to a priest sometime. Gherkin added that he didn't want to waste any more time on such people and warned the skeletons not to fall behind. One of the injured men said that the young man would regret messing with members of their guild. He managed to send an alarm signal using Warwatch. The man with rings on his fingers placed his hand on the head of the enormous tiger. He was surprised. Could it be that the stranger had attacked his men even after hearing his name? The assistant confirmed it. Everyone present bowed their heads before the master. Zhenya said that this man must be brought here at any cost. He must pay for his behavior, for not respecting them. Our hero Gherkin looked back and saw that the skeletons were having fun, dancing. He was surprised. What on earth were they doing here? Gherkin warned that today they would be hunting a warrior bear. It was level 70 and had 3 faces, so they needed to prepare thoroughly for the battle. Gherkin added that once they defeated it, they would be able to rank among the top 30 guilds in the main quest. The young man warned the skeletons that failure in this operation was unacceptable. A mutual understanding was reached. Gherkin heard a strange sound, turned around, and saw a bear warrior. The opponent was approaching our hero, sword thrust forward. The skeletons froze in place, rooted to the spot. Gurkhan activated the slot and announced that he was ready for battle. The young man was fully equipped in his gear. Gurkhan insisted that he would take on this main quest alone. The player approached the foot of the peak and said that this must be the Balkas Mountains. He hoped that the Mask of Haho was here. He had come here immediately after watching the video with the armored monkeys. The player was disappointed with how he was being treated. Why was he always being sent away? After all, he was an important person in the guild, yet he was constantly being sent off to hunt down all sorts of losers. The player didn't agree that he'd been sent here just for disobeying orders. After all, that wasn't a crime. Suddenly, a king of wild boars, a level 65 creature, charged past him. The young man activated a fire shield using his magic. He became out of reach for the king of wild boars. It was Baptiste Hatch, a member of the Thunder Hunters Guild. In the mage rankings, Baptiste Hatch held the 5th position. His mission was to locate the Haho mask. The protagonist remembered that when he and the guild members hunted this beast in his past life, it took 6 attempts to defeat it. If he didn't succeed now, someone else would surely take the lead in the main quest. The young man was confident he could do it, since he had mastered new skills for this very purpose. Gurkhan told the skeletons to get ready to attack at his signal. The young man added that it was time to use his new passive skill, muscle modification. Our hero charged into the attack. The bear got angry and swatted the skeletons left alone with his paw. The system reported that the skeleton warriors had taken critical damage and were destroyed. The muscle modification skill strengthens the legs, increasing the power and speed of the jump. The young man was glad that the game hadn't sent him straight to the moon. Gurkhan decided to seize the moment and began to increase his speed, diving straight at the warrior bear to make the blow stronger. The young man admitted that this skill was useless. He still had a lot of work to do on it. Our hero found himself captive to the bear. He was clenched in its fist. The young man managed to break free, though it wasn't easy. He did, however, manage to break his opponent's armor on at least one side. Gurkhan didn't know what to do with such a useless skill. He couldn't land a proper blow where he needed to. Gurkhan decided that in that case he should use the bone bomb. This device causes a magical explosion. Gurkhan realized that he couldn't defeat his opponent with simple damage. The skeletons looked at their master with suspicion. The young man assured them that this time everything would work out. That time it had just been an accident. He twisted his ankle. Gurkhan announced that the golem would also be on duty today. Gurkhan said that this time the bear warrior had fallen into his trap. Gurkhan said that from now on they would have to proceed without the sword. It couldn't be pulled out of the stone. Gurkhan warned the warrior bear that he still had a trick up his sleeve, so he shouldn't let his guard down. The fire attack came unexpectedly. However, the aim was slightly off. The fire also caught our hero. Gurkhan ordered the skeleton mage to attack on his command, as he needed to give the commander a chance to step aside. The warrior bear roared loudly again. He was using a battle cry. The young man decided not to stick to any strategy and to overwhelm his opponent with brute force. A few minutes later, after an intense attack, the opponent was defeated. The system reported that the player had destroyed the warrior bear and gained experience points. The ranger's quest mission was completed. Our hero had single-handedly destroyed the beast that had trampled his guild 6 times before the regression. Gurkhan felt he had approached this battle with dignity. Progress was evident. The young man praised the summoned skeletons and said they had done an excellent job. Now he could return to Mavin with a report and take on the next quest. The Western Tavern in the Balkas Mountains. Baptiste Hatch sat alone at a table, having ordered a mug of beer. Baptiste felt unlucky since he couldn't find the Haho mask anywhere. Baptiste Hatch didn't understand what the guild leader was counting on by sending him out on this search alone. The mage was angry at the Thunder Hunters. The young seer suggested that the young man was tired. Baptiste Hatch was touched by such a display of concern for him. The young man said he was fine and asked if he could return. The guild leader replied that she had sent the Haas to help him. Immediately after these words, a hole appeared in the tavern wall. The young Hai appeared in the tavern. She had made her way in by creating the hole. The girl said that because of this, Batista would have to deal with the fallout. Ha was an unstable girl and constantly disliked Baptiste Hatch. The player approached the outskirts of the city and said that a lot of people had gathered here in the mountains. They had even set up a camp. Gurkhan said that it was all too obvious to him. Here is the continuation of the main quest. You need to hurry to the hunter Mavun. The young man looked back and noticed that 3 people were chasing him. Gherkin stopped and told them to attack. He would deal with them quickly. However, the Trinity turned around and ran in the opposite direction in fear. What had happened to them? The young man thought he hadn't had a chance to do anything yet. At that moment, the pursuers were attacked by an unknown assailant. Bright flashes appeared. After the flashes, the Trinity was deactivated and fell to the ground, bleeding profusely. Gherkin, Baddest, Hatch, and Heihei believed they had found their target. Our hero realized they were from the Thunder Hunters. Heihei asked the young man if he was Mask of Haho. Heihei was ranked in the top 2 in the Thunder Hunters Guild. Heihei was a zealous, hysterical woman who would undoubtedly go to the deepest depths of hell if the guild leader ordered it. Hatch was ranked 3rd in the Thunder Hunters. He was a genius mage whom no one had ever been able to escape. Even in our hero's past life, these guys were a real problem that was hard to get rid of. Could their paths have crossed again? Gherkin thought that if they were looking for the Kaho mask, it meant they wanted to recruit his guild. Dealing with them right now didn't seem possible. Gherkin jumped down from the tree branch and asked which mask they were talking about. Who were they asking about? The young man decided to play dumb, since they couldn't do anything without proof. Haho moved in close and told the boy not to lie to her. How could this man not know about the Haki mask if he's in the Balkas Mountains? It already has over 20 million views. Heihei said his cloak was exactly the same, so she wasn't mistaken. Hatch told the girl to stop. That was the least of their problems right now. The young man added that the real problem was that Heihei was a complete idiot. Why did she destroy the tavern and kill so many people for no reason? How are they supposed to clean up this mess now? Hatch added that they belonged to a well-known guild. There was no way they could wriggle out of this. Hatch told Heihei to apologize to the people before the guild's reputation took a hit. Heihei disagreed. Why should she apologize? The protagonist thought that these two had always been like this. Heihei calmed down and apologized. Was that really what he wanted? The girl turned around and walked away. Hatch was outraged. What kind of attitude was that? Hatch apologized to Gherkin and noted that there had been a misunderstanding. Gherkin thought that at least they had fallen behind. At that moment, a fist appeared in front of him. Heihei quickly lunged at the young man and landed a devastating punch to his face. Hatch grabbed the girl by the shoulders and asked what kind of crazy behavior this was. Heihei replied that she had assumed he would be able to dodge it. Gherkin, getting up from the ground, said that you can't just attack a player for no reason. The protagonist pushed up his glasses to hide the bruise under his eye and said he would file an official complaint against the two of them. Gherkin added that he would also post about it in the community. Thunder Hunters is a malicious guild that attacks newbies for fun. Hatch said they would make up for everything. Just don't file a complaint. Hutch decided to avoid trouble and offered a sack of gold coins to settle the misunderstanding. Gherkin said he'd accept 1,000 gold coins and would let it slide this time. Hutch grabbed the girl by the hand and said they were leaving. Heihei replied that she already understood. The protagonist thought that it annoyed him too, but right now it was the best thing he could do. He shouldn't draw even more attention to himself. He needed to bide his time. Hatch asked why Heihei always seemed to be in trouble. Didn't she understand that it was important for such a large guild to maintain a good reputation? Heihei said that players instinctively dodge when they're attacked. Hatch was indignant. Was she really saying it was the guy's fault that he didn't dodge when she attacked? Heihei added that the guy grimaced before the blow. What could have been wrong with him? Why didn't he dodge? Hutch asked the girl not to cause them any more trouble. On the table lay a piece of armor from a fully armored warrior bear. Mavoon asked what was going on. If it weren't for the young man, a lot of bad things would have happened. The hunter asked if the young man was okay. The young man wanted Mavoon to hurry up. If they delayed, the top 30 guilds would easily catch up to him. Mavoon opened the chest and told the young man to choose one thing. Before our hero lay maps of dungeons and monsters that Mavoon had encountered during his time working in the Balkas Mountains. The young man realized that these were genuine treasure maps. All the dungeons where rewards could be obtained were marked on these maps. Mavoon said that in return, he wanted the young man to fulfill his request. The young man realized that the only thing that's free is cheese in a mousetrap. Mavoon added that armored monsters had been appearing more frequently in the Balkas Mountains. This matter needed to be properly investigated. Gherkin asked where that was. The hunter replied that it was in the Prung Forest. The protagonist was very upset. Mavoon asked what the problem was. The young man replied that there was no problem. In reality, our hero knew that the Prung Forest was a zone for level 90 players. The protagonist suggested that the ideal place for his hunt was the Sura Canyon. Level 75 demons are found there. The young man said that since he had handled the armored bear, these creatures wouldn't be a problem here. It was time to get back on his feet. Hirkin was surprised to see this player here. What was Matador Cheb doing here? During a video call, Hatch told Ms. Sira that he couldn't take it anymore. Hai threatened the young man with retribution. The guild leader thanked the players for their hard work. Hatch said that the Red Bulls had already taken Sura Canyon. Maybe it was time for them to focus on the main quest too. Why chase after a guy who doesn't want to join their guild? Sire said that the two of them could stop searching for the Ha-Ho mask. They needed to focus on the main quest. The mage thanked her. Siri ended the communication session and said that the strongest will inevitably meet. She'll see just how long this Ha-Ho mask can keep running from her. The 75th level demonic goat growled menacingly. The next moment, the goat was struck by a devastating blow from a sword and was destroyed. Hirkin decided that this skeleton had completed its task. The system reported that his level had increased. Our hero was pleased, for this was level 62. The protagonist believed he just needed to keep going in the same vein. Then he could set off for the Purung forest. Our hero was surrounded by people who had been watching him from afar. They recognized him as the Mask of Ha-Ho and begged him to at least look at them. Hirkin was forced to leave the area and run away very quickly. The players were surprised. Why was this guy running away from them? Hirkin ran away, not understanding how it could be that people were showing such interest in him. The video featuring the warrior bear garnered 3 million views. Our hero was happy because the video had become a hit. How much money would he be able to make? However, as always, fame brings problems. Wherever our hero went, stalkers appeared everywhere. The young man simply couldn't concentrate on hunting. The situation was driving him crazy. Once again, while running away, the protagonist said that plans had changed. They were heading to the Sura Canyon immediately. There are high-level monsters in this canyon, so those leeches won't follow them there. Thus, the young man found himself in the same place where Matador had been. Hirkin abruptly slowed down and stopped in front of the guildmaster, Matador Cheb. Cheb said they hadn't seen each other in a long time and asked how the young man had ended up here again. Matador said that this guy was from the beginners area. He had felt very awkward when the young man left without saying a word. Cheb noted that this guy had leveled up pretty quickly. Just a few months ago, he was a newbie, and now he'd already made it to the Sura Canyon. Hirkin asked what had brought Matador here. After all, this place wasn't suitable for a player like him. Matador said that the day before, the Red Bulls had taken control of Sura Canyon. Now it was his area of responsibility. Matador said they thought it would be a good idea to stay close to the main quest location. Hirkin realized that they too had already progressed through the story. Matador added that he hoped to meet Ha-Ho's mask here. The guild leader asked if the newcomer had seen his raid on the warrior bear. He happens to live somewhere in this area. I wonder who he is? Hirkin turned and ran off again, shouting that he didn't know who Ha-Ho's mask was. The young man didn't understand why everyone had turned against him. First Sol Yon, now Matador Cheb. Two major guilds were already hunting him. Why was he having such bad luck? Hirkin thought that at this rate, he wouldn't even be able to level up, let alone complete the quest. Would he really have to look for another place? However, there were no suitable locations nearby. Only here did they give more experience. Our hero remembered the map he'd received from Mavun. If he remembered correctly, there should be a rare dungeon somewhere around here. Rare dungeons are often hidden in hard-to-reach places. That was exactly the kind of place the young man had just arrived at. Hirkin thought it wouldn't be easy, but the risk should pay off. The young man took a deep breath and dove to the bottom of the lake. The skeletons followed him. His breath underwater was limited. He had no more than 20 seconds left. If the map was accurate, there must be a hidden dungeon somewhere around here. The young man hoped he would make it to the surface in time. Hirkin saw sunlight above and began to rise quickly to the surface. It was still too far away, but our hero was counting on making it up in time. At the last second, the protagonist surfaced, and the skeletons followed him. The system reported that the player had entered the dungeon and received the title of Pioneer. Hirkin said that was just wonderful. If people started giving him a hard time, he could escape here to get away from them. The young man wondered what kind of monsters might be here. If the dungeon was secret, the monsters must be very strong. The first monster they encountered was a slime. The skeletons began examining it with interest. Hirkin said this was just a joke. He hadn't come here to run into some slime. The slime turned red and began to emit fire. The young man had never seen anything like this before. Our hero realized that he was facing a monster with an attribute. A monster with an attribute is a very rare type of monster in Warlord. Items dropped by such monsters are used to enchant items with the corresponding element. That's why they're so popular. In other words, the young man figured he could become obscenely rich thanks to these monsters. Hirkin sent his skeletons ahead and ordered them to find and destroy every single monster. Suddenly, a level 70 salamander monster appeared above one of the slimes. It was a mid-tier fire-type monster. The salamander shot out a tongue of flame. The protagonist and the skeletons turned and began to flee frantically. The scorched young man was forced to admit that this salamander was spitting fire. It wouldn't be so easy to deal with her. The young man decided he had no choice. While the salamander wasn't yet a problem, he had to take advantage of that. A fireball appeared in the hero's hand. One of the skeletons put on the helmet of madness. Flaming horns appeared on its head. The skeleton also grew a bony beard, which looked very unnatural. Our hero thought that he would finally be able to use the Black Orc's skull to strengthen his skeletons. The skeleton knight was activated. His rank was off the charts. The fire salamander prepared for battle and began to slowly approach its opponent. Hirkin asked how the salamander was feeling when his skeleton knight proved itself in action. The young man noticed that now a whole flock of salamanders was advancing on him. Our hero realized that this might be an uneven fight against a mob. The salamanders hissed aggressively. Hirkin said he was choosing the skeleton knight. The knight began swinging his sword, and the salamander was cut into many neat pieces. The system reported that the salamander monster had been destroyed. Experience points were earned. Hirkin looked at the skeleton knight and said that he was perfection. The other skeletons became his fans. Hirkin noted that auto-farming was the ultimate skill. The young man was overjoyed. Now that our hero has leveled up the skeletons, they can hunt on their own. Considering that salamander essence is more expensive than the young man thought, he will be able to easily recoup the cost of leveling them up. Hirkin decided that he would continue working this way until he had perfected all the skeletons. The protagonist told the skeletons to keep it up until he led the boss, and they headed to the Purung forest. An hour later, our hero was upset again. He said that this was exactly what he had feared. It was all going too well and too smoothly. The system reported that the player had discovered the throne room dungeon instance. Did he wish to enter? The protagonist thought it was scary to go inside. He might not be able to get out again. The young man understood that if he failed, he wouldn't be able to log into the game for a full 2 days. That would be more than enough time for the Thunder Hunters, or Red Bulls, to overtake him on the main storyline. Hirkin realized there were no more decent farming spots left in the area. The young man had no choice. The protagonist said that in that case, he would leave it up to luck. The system reported that the player had entered the throne room. Skeletons diligently followed their master. Statues of knights stood along the walls. The young man surmised that this was some kind of abandoned temple. Traces of blades were clearly visible on the statues. Ahead was a throne on which a knight sat, and a huge sword was stuck in the floor nearby. Hirkin shouted for the skeletons to immediately assume a defensive stance. This place was dangerous. The next moment, the skeletons came under attack. Their skulls were torn from their shoulders. The system reported that the skeleton warriors had taken too much damage and had been destroyed. An 80-level knight spirit descended from the throne. The protagonist couldn't have imagined that this creature would be here. It was a monster whose artificial intelligence was extremely sophisticated. The spirit of the knight, not even Grok could compare to it. In a past life, our hero had encountered something similar. Back then, the young man was roughly at the same level as he was now, and he was with his guild as well. However, they were defeated back then, left with not a single chance of survival. That time, our hero could only retreat. Now, however, the situation was different. Retreat was an unthinkable luxury for him. The protagonist summoned the skeleton warriors once more. As always, there was work for them to do. Hirkin ordered the skeletons to strike the opponent with all their might from the very start. However, the knight spirit possessed incredible power, and the skeletons took damage. Some were decapitated. Hirkin approached his opponent and crossed swords with him. The confrontation was no joke. The skeletons proved themselves worthy. However, they were completely devoid of fear. The young man told them to spare their bodies, or they would lose all their bones. During the next attack, the summoned skeleton warrior was destroyed. Our hero realized that a blow to the heart was not fatal to the spirit of the knight. Hirkin understood that ordinary skeletons or a golem wouldn't help here anymore. That meant he had almost no chance. Our hero recalled a past battle with a monster. The hunter had asked why the young man had gone up against an enemy 4 times his strength. Gurkhan replied that he didn't know himself. Was the hunter really that interested in the reason? The protagonist realized he had been thinking, "No food until I defeat this monster." That was his main motivation. This time the young man said that discussing strategy wasn't his style at all. If his critical hits don't land, he'll just keep attacking as usual until he runs out of stamina. That strategy worked too. You just have to keep going and keep attacking. However, the knight's spirit continued to accelerate. During the next attack, the opponent made a mistake, and the young man said, "Finally, he's had it." The warrior knight approached from behind at a safe distance and swung his sword to strike. Gurkhan praised the warrior knight for his quick thinking and superbly executed attack. The young man repeated his phrase, "He won't be able to eat until he defeats this opponent, so he must keep going." The village near the Sura Canyon went about its usual life. Matador Cheb told his companion that the camp was growing. He hadn't expected that. The girl replied that they had approached the setup responsibly. They had supply routes as well as established sales channels. Matador Cheb suggested that the Ha-Ho mask might stop by here too. The girl said that Cheb was obsessed with this guy. She didn't understand him. After all, he was just a hunter of low-level monsters. Matador replied that while these monsters were low-level to them, it was a different story for the Ha-Ho mask. In this game, only 2 types of people dare to challenge monsters significantly stronger than themselves. Cheb added that they were madmen and natural-born warriors. The Ha-Ha mask was both in one. The protagonist noted that for the knight spirit, losing a few hands is a mere trifle. Although the young man was upset by this fact, Gurkhan once again ordered the skeletons to attack the opponent. The spirit of the knight activated a fiery hand to replace the one he had lost. Gurkhan said that his opponent truly wanted to bury him alive, but that wasn't part of the hero's plan. Spreading out along the front line, the young man and his skeletons began attacking the knight spirit. The opponent spun in place, trying to fend off all the attacks directed at him. Gurkhan noted that the strategy was working perfectly. He just needed to keep dealing damage. Then victory would inevitably come, for the enemy would be defeated. The knight spirit didn't give up and activated its fire defense. Now it was impossible to get close to it. Gurkhan was furious. His opponent had become significantly stronger. He needed to change his approach immediately. Gurkhan noticed that the knight spirit had drastically changed its attack pattern. It was evolving in the heat of battle. Gurkhan lunged forward like a sprinter, trying to break through the fiery barrier and close in on his opponent. There was hope of turning the tide of battle by knocking the enemy off his feet. The protagonist told the skeletons that they were moving on to the next phase. The knight spirit showed resilience and had no intention of giving up just yet. The fiery resistance continued. Gurkhan realized he had focused too much on controlling the skeletons. He couldn't lose sight of the main objective. Otherwise, the knight spirit might seize the initiative. The summoned skeleton knight was attacked by flames. His armor took damage. The system reported that the skeleton knight had taken too much damage. His stats had deteriorated, and his immunity to subsequent attacks had weakened. The damage was extremely high, and the skeleton knight was destroyed once again. The situation was getting worse. Our hero did not despair and activated the bone bombs. He always had this trump card up his sleeve. Explosions rang out from all sides. The knight spirit found itself at the epicenter of the destruction. The young man believed that this was still not enough. He had to keep pressing forward without stopping. Gurkhan admitted that he understood the situation. Magical damage was no threat to spirit monsters. But did his opponent really think he was just wasting bone bombs for nothing? The boy said he had added a skeleton fragment to each one. After that, the maximum summon skeleton fragment was activated. The summoned skeletons reached the opponent and surrounded him on all sides. The protagonist said that now the knight spirit had met its end. The system reported that the knight spirit had been destroyed. Gold coins were obtained. The title Knight Spirit Destroyer was obtained. The protagonist's level was raised, and fragmented knight spirit armor was obtained. Experience points were also awarded. The hunter had previously said that there was no way they could defeat this knight spirit. The guildmaster had dragged them into this and signed their death warrant. Now, everything was different from what it had been in his past life. The protagonist praised the skeletons for their excellent work. The young man was surprised. Why weren't they heading back? Could there really be someone else here? Our heroes surmised that another boss monster might be lurking in this location. Suddenly, the door swung open, revealing the treasure room. Without hesitation, Gherkin immediately rushed toward the treasures. Our hero was curious to see what reward he would receive: gold, a weapon, or a hidden skill book. He was ready for anything. A Talmud of ancient power research appeared in our hero's hands. This was a key plot item, but the young man had already studied it extensively in his past life, so the hero knew it by heart. Gherkin was disappointed. Why was there such junk in the reward room? It would have been better to get money or a cool weapon with a sniper scope. Our hero, who would have thought they'd actually stumble upon the reward room? An advanced skill allowed him to equip summoned creatures. Now the skeletons had weapons and they posed a real threat. The young man realized that he could now upgrade the skeletons regardless of his own level. Although buying equipment wouldn't be cheap, Gherkin told the skeletons to try to justify his expenses. Suddenly, hunters emerged from the forest and said they were impressed by the Haho mask. They added that the rumors were true. These were people who lived for romance and were willing to die for it. It was the romantic gangster family R2. The protagonist decided that this game had attracted a lot of crazy players. He was overcome by a sudden urge to destroy the game completely. The oldest of the gangsters said that Mask Haho moves very fast, but that's to be expected from someone of his caliber. The young man could barely restrain himself from losing his temper. He watched the gangsters in silence. A thug told the young man to stop. They really couldn't keep up with him. Gherkin turned around and told them to back off if they didn't want to get themselves into trouble. The thug added that the R2 family was currently training in the Purong Forest to reach the 100th level. However, the local monsters are too strong for them, so they often have to flee. They can't handle such ferocious creatures on their own, so they roam the area looking for allies. Their allies must be strong. The bandit said that for some reason, no one wants to join them. Gherkin thought that wasn't surprising. The bandit added that they were begging the young man to join them and protect their romance. Gherkin shouted for them to leave him alone. A few minutes later, the bandits were deactivated. The young man said he wasn't interested in their romance and wasn't going to work with anyone. The guy warned that if he saw them again, he'd take harsher action. They'd be destroyed. The bandits were upset because they had been rejected again, and this guy was their last hope. Why were they so unlucky? Maybe they should just give up and leave the Purong Forest. The bandit added that those players would now ask for help. A distress signal came in on War Watch. A huge, ferocious monster blocked our hero's path. Not even armed skeletons could scare it. The protagonist told the skeletons that they must attack all at once and strictly follow orders. The attack was successful, and the monster was torn to pieces on the first try. The system reported that the player had destroyed a black ogre, and experience points were earned. The ogre wasn't alone. However, our hero dealt with them all. There were 55 of them. The young man thought that having defeated the night spirit, the remaining monsters were as good as dust under his feet. They were too predictable. Now the young man decided he would be able to level up very quickly. However, it turned out that the protagonist didn't encounter a single armored monster. He hadn't made any progress on the main quest at all. Gherkin thought he couldn't waste any more time. The top 30 guilds had already started progressing through the main storyline. It was only a matter of time before they caught up to him. Gherkin began to wonder if he should have contacted those R2 guys to get at least something out of it. Our hero remembered the bandits and decided he'd rather die than work with the likes of them. Explosions rang out somewhere beyond the forest. The young man was outraged. Who has nothing better to do? After all, now all the monsters will come running. Who are they fighting that's causing such a racket? The bandits were under attack by the armed monsters our hero had been searching for so intensely. The monsters were fully armored. It was impossible to even attack them properly. You can't take them by surprise. They're in formation. Are there really monsters like this in this area? The monster lord was lurking in the shadows, issuing orders. The player thought that this monster must be quite intelligent, since it was commanding an entire army. They had let their guard down. These monsters were not something they could handle. A wall of fire was activated. The monsters took the initiative. The bandit captain said they wouldn't last long like this. The other team also couldn't handle these monsters. The bandit suggested to the captain that they flee while there was still time. Otherwise, the monsters would crush them. The squad leader thought that might be the best option, since their chances of defeating these monsters were slim to none. The bandits spotted a player running by. The commander asked for help. Gherkin replied that he didn't have time. Gherkin said he wouldn't help them. It wasn't his concern. The romantic R2 bandits hugged each other and realized their end had come. However, the commander perked up and said they needed to use their remaining mana to secure a safe retreat for themselves and the other team. The commander added that they were no strangers to being abandoned at the most difficult moment, but at least they shouldn't do the same. The commander rushed at the monsters and said he would hold them off, while his comrades in arms should help the people. The team captain said the filthy monsters wouldn't get past and attacked the nearest one. The player said his tactic had worked. Now they just had to hold out. With that, the standoff continued. However, the monster was stronger and managed to throw the player far to the side. The captain realized he didn't have enough strength to stand up to the monster. The monster raised its foot over the fallen player. The next moment, a knight in armor appeared. He stopped the monster's attack and told the captain to stop trying to be cool. The knight turned out to be Hirkin. The protagonist declared that he wasn't there to help them. The young man warned the players not to even think about touching his loot. The captain of R2 looked back and saw that the knight was fighting alongside armed skeletons. The young man ordered the skeletons to attack, and the monsters came under assault. The captain was surprised. Was such a thing even possible? Could skeletons really do that? The player believed that ordinary necromancers were incapable of such a feat. The captain wondered, who exactly was this mask of Haho? The battle ended in an uncontested victory for the necromancer. The armed skeletons finished off the wounded monsters on the battlefield. The system reported that the player had destroyed the armored ogre. Experience points were earned. Hirkin said he had dealt with the little monster. The young man turned to the boss and asked, was he really sad that his minions had been destroyed? There was no need to worry. The boss would soon be reunited with them. The level 80 armored ogre roared loudly and charged at the protagonist. The captain of Team R2 said that what he saw was terrifying. He hoped that Mask Haho could handle it, since this was a difficult boss even for him. The knight said he was afraid to look into this ogre's eyes. Will Mask Haho really pull it off? The monster's eyes were black and red, meaning it was infected and tied to the main quest line. Such monsters are 3 times stronger than the ordinary ones they're used to. The armored monster struck. The protagonist dodged but was knocked far back by the shockwave. The protagonist agreed that the monster was stronger than its minions. The knight told Mask Haho not to even think about getting any closer. The armored monster went on the offensive. The knight said this could end badly. The Ha-Ha mask wouldn't be able to handle something like this. However, our hero swung his sword and went on the offensive. He said he would now test whether his opponent could block his strike. The attack proved effective. The monster suffered a through-and-through wound in the chest area. This wound was incompatible with further life. As a result, the monster was destroyed. Crimson blood flowed from the massive wound. The system reported that the player had destroyed the armored ogre. Gold was obtained, experience points were awarded, and the player's level was raised. The young man said it had been a piece of cake. The system reported that the player had obtained a fragment of the ogre's helmet and fulfilled the requirement to complete the quest. The young man said it was time to return to the hunter Marvin to continue advancing the story. The young man looked at the other players and thought he first needed to figure out how to divide up the loot they'd received. 20 black orcs and 1 armored ogre. The young man realized that this rare monster would bring in a fortune. But the thing was, only the player who attacked the monster first could decide how to split the loot. Our hero believed that he was the one who had done all the work. That meant he was the one who should be entitled to decide how the rewards were distributed. The protagonist wanted to wait until the monsters killed all the other players. That was part of his plan. The captain of Team R2 had said earlier that they were used to being abandoned at the most difficult moment. As soon as our hero heard those words, his body moved on its own. The players thanked Mask Haho, since they had survived thanks to him. Hirkin thought that at least these guys were grateful to him for his help. The squad commander said they couldn't just let Mask Haho go. Hirkin replied that this was to be expected. He hasn't expected anything good from people in a long time. When it comes to money, nothing else matters anymore. However, the other players were interested specifically in Mask Haho, wanting to take a group photo with him. The R2 commander said he wanted to take a selfie with Haho Mask as proof that they had participated in the raid. The young man was surprised. Didn't they want to split the loot? The commander asked the knight if he needed any items. The knight replied that these items were expensive, so he wouldn't turn them down. The commander asked the knight, Surely he wasn't going to act like a scoundrel and take the loot when everyone owed their lives to Ha-Ho Mask. The knight agreed and added that Ha-Ho Mask should take all the loot. The squad commander said that no one was claiming the loot, so Mask Ha-Ho could take it all in the name of love. Our hero kept trying to figure out what kind of love these guys had. He just couldn't understand them. Hirkin continued on his route at a brisk pace along the forest road, accompanied by armed skeletons. The squad commander said that their skills weren't much help to Mask Ha-Ho, so they understood he wouldn't be joining them. However, they were always ready to lend a hand if Mask Ha-Ho needed it. The protagonist thought that even though these guys looked silly, playing a game with them wouldn't be so bad. The young man also understood that if he agreed, he would never become the best version of himself. Hirkin was going to take on the top 30 guilds and defeat them. The protagonist told the skeletons to hurry up. They needed to finish this quest quickly and move on to the next one. Guild leader Sir stood atop the destroyed armored bear. The guild members were nearby. Everyone was impressed since their leader had taken down this monster. Now they could collect the loot. Sir thought it had been too easy. Hey greeted the Queen of Thunder. Hatch was very tired of his companion. Hahi said that the guild leader was awesome, as always. She had elegantly finished off that monster. Surrey asked what had happened. Hatch said they had managed to get some information. Battist explained that 2 guilds from the top 30 had started a war. These were the Three Wings and Fang guilds. It all started when Berg, the leader of the Oskal Guild, started a fight with a member of Truckrill when they ran into each other during a raid. Since then, both guilds have spared no resources in this war. The Fang Guild is having a hard time. Siri said it was very foolish to start a war when the main quest was at stake. Hatch agreed. The leader was absolutely right. Siri expressed hope that they would wipe each other out and asked what other news there was. Hatch said that Mask of Ha-Ho had defeated the armored ogre. For some reason, when it comes to the main storyline, he's always one step ahead. Hutch was surprised. Did Sir actually smile at his words? He had expected the guildmaster to fly into a rage. Sir said that they needed to speed things up as well. The guild leader declared that they needed to take the next quest from the hunter, Maven. The Thunder Hunters were required to complete the 2nd chapter of the main storyline. At Bansu Castle, Ahimbri smiled and said they hadn't seen each other in a long time. Hirkin was upset. Why this NPC again? Ahimbri noted that Maven had told him everything. The young man had handled the assigned task perfectly. Now he must pass this on to the young man, since he is already competent enough. A ring of the secret order appeared in Akimbri's hands. It was a unique artifact that boosted all stats. Hirkin thought that everything had been going well up to this point. Earlier, when the hunter Mavoon told him, the young man was delighted to learn that he was now a member of the secret order. Mavoon told him he needed to think this through carefully. As a member of the secret order, he must be prepared to risk his life. The young man replied that he agreed. Hirkin declared that he was not afraid to risk his life fighting evil for the sake of justice and peace throughout the world. The protagonist assumed that if he joined the secret order, he would receive a ring that would significantly boost his stats. Mavoon said that in that case, the young man must set out and find his teacher. Hirkin was surprised. Why was that necessary? The hunter explained that Akimbri was also a member of the secret order. He was to present the emblem to the apprentice. Hirkin understood that this madman wouldn't just hand him the ring. Now the young man mentally begged his teacher to give him the artifact. Hirkin leaned over the table and asked, "Does the teacher really think he'll always have the patience to put up with him?" The boy lowered his head and said that in that case, the teacher was right. He really wanted to get that ring. The young man believed the reward was too good to pass up. The ring was received, and Ahimbri noted that the young man was now a member of the secret order. Therefore, he would graciously give him the next task. Akimbri added that he would assign a mission that would make the young man stronger. They must head straight to the combat zone. Hirkin arrived at the large fortress gates and surmised that it must be somewhere here, near the battlefield. The battlefield is an endless stream of monsters pouring out from behind the castle walls. The monsters keep swarming for a while, making everything much more dangerous than on regular raids. However, the reward corresponds to the number of monsters defeated. Therefore, there is a chance to earn a lot of money from this. In this quest on the battlefield, you must defeat the monsters emerging from behind the walls of Turb Castle. Hirkin had wanted to come here even before the regression, but it never worked out because the guild members didn't want to come here. Now he was eagerly awaiting it. Hirkin decided that, to start with, he needed to prepare a little. A mysterious girl around the corner was keeping a constant watch on the hero. The girl used War Watch to contact headquarters to relay the information. She reported that she had found the Mask of Ha-Ho. A huge tiger baring its teeth was closing in on the terrified player. The player dropped to his knees before the Lord and begged for mercy. The Lord said that these fools couldn't even handle a single rookie. Why did they return empty-handed? It was Apollo, the head of the Apollo Guild. The player said that the Thunder Hunters had suddenly appeared, and there was nothing he could do about it. The player added that the Thunder Hunters were deliberately trying to lure him into their guild. Apollo thought that their competitors were acting dishonorably. Apollo decided that the head of their guild was acting arrogantly simply because he thought he was backed by guilds in the top 30. The phone rang. Hirkin, an officer of the Big Smile Guild, answered Apollo's call. Hirkin asked what was up. He wanted to know what this fat guy wanted this time. Apollo asked for a favor. Apollo added that he needed to teach a player named Mask of Ha-Ho a lesson. Hirkin asked, "Are you talking about that newbie who's been getting popular lately? But why do you need to do that?" Apollo replied that this guy had dared to mess with his guild and hadn't even apologized. Apollo added that, in other words, he had made him look like a complete fool. Hirkin apologized and said he couldn't do that, since the well-known Big Smile Guild shouldn't get involved in such matters. Apollo said he had no other choice. Starting today, he was cutting off his sponsorship of Big Smile. Wasn't it thanks to his sponsorship that they'd managed to break into the top 30? Apollo remarked that if Hirkin couldn't even fulfill such a small request, there was no point in sponsoring him anymore. Hirkin replied that this Mask of Ha-Ho was indeed a scoundrel. He would take care of it immediately. Hirkin added that he would definitely contact Apollo as soon as he sorted out the situation. Hirkin was very angry. If he refused to do this, they would pay dearly. However, attacking Mask Ha-Ho could damage his guild's reputation. Cho Woo-ryun entered the office. She was a reserve member of the Big Smile Guild. The girl asked if she just needed to eliminate Masked Ha-Ho. Hirkin thought that if Cho Woo-ryun handled it, it surely wouldn't harm the guild's reputation. After all, the girl wasn't an official member yet. Cho Woo-ryun said she could handle it, and the leader could assign her the task. She added that she would definitely destroy the Ha-Ho mask. Hirkin had no idea that he now had more pursuers. The knight ordered everyone to line up in front of the castle gates. The captain of the Turb Castle wall guard named Beagle said they would now open the gates. Everyone, get ready. The protagonist knew that this captain was the main NPC. Beyond these walls lay a lawless zone where monsters roamed freely. Beagle noted that the castle gates would not open again for another 144 hours. The reward would depend on how many monsters were destroyed during that time. Beagle noted that all players would be assigned special missions. Our hero was assigned the Blue Giant quest. He must defeat the blue mutant giant that will appear on the battlefield. A unique skill book will be awarded as a reward for completing this task. A unique skill book is an item that grants a unique rank skill. The protagonist had seen such a book only a few times in his past life. Hirkin looked at his rivals and realized that this skill book was indeed unique. He needed it, so he had to eliminate the competition. Hirkin surmised that his ability to defeat the blue giant wasn't what mattered here. As soon as the gates opened, Hirkin was the first to rush out. He wanted to get ahead of everyone. The hunters assumed the young man had figured everything out and decided to catch up to and neutralize him immediately. Cho Woo-ryun, who was among the participants, said she had a suggestion. Why not join forces? One of the players told the girl that she was just a newbie. Who did she think she was, trying to tell them what to do? They could handle the Ha-Ho mask on their own. To show she meant business, Cho Woo-ryun took out that hunter and asked, why did everyone suddenly start trembling? Could it be because of the unique skill book? The girl added that she wasn't interested in the book. She just needed to deal with the Ha-Ho mask. Cho Woo-ryun told the hunters that if they obeyed her, she would give them the book. They wouldn't be able to obtain it on their own with their current skills anyway. The girl added that this was a good deal for everyone present. Hirkin, from a safe spot, watched the hunters. The young man was surprised. Had they really banded together just to destroy him? Why were there so many annoying scoundrels in this world? Hirkin realized he would be busy hunting monsters, and now he'd have to deal with these guys as well. Hirkin said he had no choice but to do it. Cho Woo-ryun thought she was lucky to have gathered so many people. Now she doubted whether the Ha-Ho mask could hold out against such a large number. The girl wondered what she would do after she dealt with this guy. Cho Woo-ryun decided that as soon as she was done with him, Hirkin would immediately recognize her. and she would be able to officially join the Big Smile Guild. Then she would have her own subordinates. She imagined guys running after her and trying to win her favor. Cho Warren imagined how many people would serve her and offer their services. Suddenly, someone shouted that the monsters were advancing. Cho Warren ordered everyone to form a line. Now they would deal with the monsters one by one. One of the hunters noticed that something was wrong here. There were far too many monsters compared to the usual waves. The ring around the hunters was closing in. Cho Warren thought that they wouldn't be able to maintain their formation this way. What on earth was going on here? Following the monsters, a huge stone golem was approaching the hunters, with Mask of Haho perched on its back. The young man asked, were they all really trying to unite against him? The protagonist began to make loud noises and said that they wouldn't succeed. Cho Warren said in surprise that this guy was lost among the monsters. How could he do such a thing? The monsters got close enough to attack the players, dealing irreparable damage. One of the knights told the girl that they couldn't hold out any longer, since there were too many monsters. The knight begged the girl to order a retreat. Cho Warren drew her blades and prepared to attack the monsters to reach the Haho mask. Cho Warren realized that her plan had completely failed. They had planned to attack the Haho mask while he was distracted by the hunt, but instead, they were the ones who were attacked. The girl told the players to hold out here as long as they could. As soon as the leader disappeared, the wave of monsters would leave. Cho Warren told the players that she would take care of the Haho mask herself. The girl thought that while these little skeletons served as bait for the monsters, she would destroy the Haho mask herself. Hirkin told his summoned skeletons that their attacks lacked soul. They needed to put some feeling into them. Cho Warren thrust her blade forward and declared that she was challenging the Haho mask to a duel. Hirkin said that was exactly what he had hoped for. He had managed to lure her out. Hirkin asked, is she the one in command of this so-called alliance? The protagonist asked the girl if she knew him. He couldn't remember her face. Our hero added that he found it strange why she wanted to deal with him so badly. How could he have offended her? Cho Warren thought that the anonymous person must be revealing something related to Sir Havabin. The girl replied that she just wanted to get rid of a rival in the fight for the unique skill book ahead of time. Cho Warren and Hirkin crossed their blades. Sparks flew in all directions from their weapons. The protagonist said he didn't really believe the girl was interested in the skill book. Hirkin thought the girl was a decent fighter and used a bone bomb against her. Cho Warren reacted in time and, using her acrobatic skills, managed to dodge the blast wave. Hirkin was surprised. Could the girl have dodged that too? It was impossible for someone so skilled to be a nobody. The young man asked which guild she belonged to. Cho Warren replied that if he was interested, he could find out for himself, without her help. The girl activated a slot on her war watch. In that very moment, armor appeared on Cho Warren, and a battle sword appeared in her hands. Hirkin thought that his opponent had decided to go all out since she was using weapons. Our hero pondered. If he dealt with her now, he wouldn't be able to find out where she'd come from. But if he gave her a head start, she might become too dangerous. Hirkin thrust his sword forward and told the girl not to hold back and to attack. Cho Warren declared that from this moment on, she would be serious. The skeletons once again stocked up on popcorn and 3D glasses for an entertaining show. The girl looked back and wondered, what are the skeletons doing here? Hirkin told her not to worry. He had ordered them not to interfere. Cho Warren asked in surprise. Why? Was the young man really that confident? Hirkin replied that his rival had challenged him to a duel. Why would he need summoned creatures in a one-on-one battle? Cho Warren was at a loss. She had thought he was just a reckless clown, but he turned out to be even more naive than she had expected. The girl thought that because of his naivety, this guy would die today. She warned him that she would attack. The rivals' blades clashed again, and sparks flew in all directions once more. Hirkin said that her attacks were no different from the previous ones. The girl proved to be more cunning and crept up, lunging from behind. The protagonist didn't have time to dodge and was wounded. His body began to bleed. Hirkin was surprised. Had her speed just increased? Cho Warren declared that she wasn't finished yet and that he shouldn't let his guard down. After a series of quick lunges, the young man's body was covered in wounds, all of them bleeding. Hirkin stopped resisting and dropped to his knees. Cho Warren began to approach her opponent. The girl said that was very cute. While he was on his knees, she felt like using him as a chair. Cho Warren swung her blades and declared that she would destroy him. He would regret having crossed paths with Sir Havabin. The girl failed to achieve her goal. The summoned skeleton tripped her, and she lost her balance and fell. The girl was outraged. What on earth was that? That's against the rules. Hirkin jumped to his feet, swung his blade, and said, "So she's from Big Smile." The girl was disarmed and tied to a tree. Cho Wuron lost this battle spectacularly. The young man asked the bound girl why Big Smile was hunting him. Cho Wuron asked, "Doesn't he know that?" His rival said she wasn't going to admit it. The guy wouldn't be able to force a confession out of her. Hirkin asked, "Is her name really Cho Wuron?" Hirkin added that she must be a subordinate of Hey Bibin from Big Smile. The girl blushed, looked away, and said that wasn't true. Hirkin realized he was right. Cho Woo-young couldn't take it anymore and asked how the guy found out about it. Our hero remembered from his past life that this girl was Haben's most notorious henchwoman. He announced that he had his own sources of information and didn't reveal his informants. Hirkin repeated his question. Why was Big Smile hunting him, since he had no connection to them whatsoever? The girl replied that she didn't know. Cho Woo-young told him not to torment her and to just kill her. Hirkin replied that he couldn't do that. He couldn't let someone die so easily. The protagonist thought that even if he killed her, she would come back to life in 2 days. Better to tie her up and leave her here to rot slowly. The guy received a message on Warwatch about the appearance of a blue giant. Hirkin said he was leaving, but if the girl tried anything again, he would truly destroy her. Cho Wuron thought that this man hadn't just exposed her plan, but had completely defeated her. Cho Wuron recalled his words about how he couldn't let anyone die just like that. The girl was upset. How dare masked Haho flirt with her? However, our hero had never acted that way. Cho Wuron contacted the guild leader and apologized. She hadn't managed to deal with the Haho mask. Hyben said that she had done her best so she could rest. The guildmaster ended the conversation and shouted loudly in frustration because he had been so sure that Cho Wuron would be able to help him. Hyben tried to calm down and think positively. Apollo doesn't know about this yet, so they should try again. Apollo contacted him himself and said he had information that Heben had failed to defeat the Haho mask. Apollo added that the Big Smile Guild had lost to the Haho mask. But what if this fact came to light? Hyben nearly fainted from fear. After all, it's all because of that guy. How infuriating he is. Hirkin scratched his ear and thought that someone was talking about him right now. The protagonist was glad. After all, he had gotten rid of that crazy woman, Cho Woo-young. The young man learned that her guild was ranked in the top 30 and was called Big Smile. But the reason they wanted to get rid of him remained unknown. Our hero would have liked to question her further, but he didn't have time. For now, he decided to go hunt the event monster, the Blue Giant. Hirkin thought that more than one adventure lay ahead of him. Hirkin completed the task, and the level 85 Blue Giant was destroyed. Hirkin was surprised. Why did his HP match that of a level 100 monster? Even fighting at full strength, the battle against him took half an hour. Hirkin caught himself and said he wasn't going to thank them, since they'd decided to hunt him down themselves, so they belonged in hell. Hirkin remembered that Big Smile was hunting him. But why? After all, he had no connection to them whatsoever. Hirkin remembered that before the regression, his guild had suddenly become famous. The top 30 guilds had formed an alliance, trying to destroy his guild. At the center of it all was the Thunder Hunters Guild, led by Sol Yan. The young man thought, could this really be her doing again? Hirkin realized that something was clearly wrong here. This didn't suit the hero at all. The young man decided to take a simpler approach. Anyone who stood in his way would be destroyed. The protagonist checked the time and realized he had 138 hours left. The allotted time passed and the gates opened. The players were returning. The players considered this battlefield event a complete disaster. They shouldn't have gotten involved with Haho's mask. They shouldn't have listened to Cho Woo-young. Hirkin, laden with treasures, waved his hand to stop them from arguing. Why quarrel on such a fine day? Cho Woo-young thought that next time, she would handle masked Haho differently. The girl decided that she would definitely defeat him and make him her boyfriend. However, she felt ashamed of her thoughts and decided that she would definitely have to destroy him. Hirkin felt a sudden sense of unease. Captain Beagle announced that he would name the best hunter of this mission. The captain told Hirkin to report to his office immediately. The young man had been waiting for this for a long time. Beagle admitted that it was impressive. The boy had destroyed the most monsters, including even a blue giant. He thanked our hero for his efforts. The captain noted that recently, more and more strange monsters had begun to appear. These are monsters with blue skin. They radiate cold. No one had seen such creatures before. Just like that blue giant the young man had recently defeated. Beagle added that these monsters come from the direction of the snowy mountains. The captain added that when the opportunity arose, they should cross those mountains and find out everything about those monsters. Our hero had heard that beyond the combat zone there was a location called the Frozen Kingdom. He knew about it, so he didn't want to go into details. Beagle suggested discussing the quest reward. The captain noted that the young man's master had sent him a message. The mentor asked the young man to go to the Urgle mountain range. This was a quest for a secret order. He needs to meet with Ulf from the smithy and find out about the next mission. Our hero knew that this place was teeming with high-level monsters. It was no surprise that a Kimbri had sent him to a combat zone first. The protagonist wasn't sure. Maybe he'd sent him there just for fun. That couldn't be ruled out. The captain said it was time to give the winner the promised reward. It was an unnamed skill book of the unique rank. Gherkin tried to guess what skill he would receive. If it was a unique skill, he would be happy with any of them. Our hero used the unnamed skill book and received the skill of working with clay. It wasn't quite what he wanted. Hatch told the guildmaster to calm down. Hutch was frightened. The mage was scared. Siri wondered how they had appeared out of nowhere. While their guild was fighting, they destroyed the main quest monster that her guild had been hunting. The guild leader was furious. Who were these scoundrels who dared to do such a thing? Hutch said they weren't in the top 30. Judging by the fact that they managed to evade surveillance, they must be high-ranking players. Seer said they needed to compile a description of them and put a bounty on their heads. They also had to make sure no one could approach that spot until the next day. The guild leader said, "Whoever they are, how dare they steal her loot?" She was ready to destroy them all. The young man asked, "Isn't that going too far? Stealing the Thunder Hunter's target? How could they have assigned such a dangerous mission? He nearly died." The girl said they had no choice. The Thunder Hunters were completing the main quest faster than expected. The young man asked his Hydra comrade what would happen next. Couldn't they just destroy them? The girl told him to calm down. If they did that, their identities would be exposed and they'd be in big trouble. The young single, Richard Meikle, said she understood that too. Viver agreed with his colleagues and added something in an incomprehensible language. Momo asked Single about the Ha-Ho mask. Ever since Single failed, that guy has been completing the main quest way too quickly. Meikle said she was tired of these conversations. It was time to move on to the next mission. The Hand Guild set off on their next mission. They were doing it for the master. The clay sculpting skill can turn a golem into a monster by using the byproducts of other monsters as offerings. The protagonist realized that this was a pretty good skill. He would also have access to various monsters that he could use in battle. Gherkin decided it was time to test all of this out. The young man used the tooth of a blue giant. Our hero activated the clay sculpting skill. To do so, he used a stone golem and the blue giant's tooth. The result turned out to be quite unexpected. A rather unimpressive giant pet was created. The system reported that the player's skill level was low, so the success rate was less than 50%. Gherkin shouted that this was a very stupid game. How could they have done this to him? The solo game emperor is facing difficulties once again. The village of Urgal was situated at the foot of a mountain range. Our hero believed it was his own fault. He shouldn't have expected too much. Pets were rare even in his past life. There was no way he could have gotten one so easily. The young man decided that in the future he would gradually improve his clay modeling skill. For now, it's better to focus on the main story quest. In the quest from the Secret Order, he must travel to the Urgal Mountains and meet with the blacksmith Ulf to receive information about the next task. Gherkin thought that he knew this blacksmith very well from his past life. The blacksmith is a member of the Secret Order and is the most famous NPC blacksmith. Countless epic items with incredible stats were forged in Ulf's hands. Outside the main storyline, it's practically impossible to encounter him, which is why our hero has never met him before. But this time, he might be able to get his hands on a good weapon, maybe even one with a laser sight. Gherkin knocked on the door, pushed it open slightly and apologized. The young man stepped inside and was surprised. Why is no one here? The room looked abandoned. A shadow flashed behind the protagonist. It happened in a flash. The young man didn't have time to react. He was knocked deep into the room by a hammer blow. The guy was baffled. Who was attacking him in an NPC zone? The man was surprised. Was that all there was to it? Today's newbies really are weaklings. The blacksmith said that in his day, they were much stronger. It was the NPC blacksmith Ulf. Gherkin asked why the blacksmith had just hit him. The old man replied that it was a test for a newbie, a test of strength. After all, they weren't called the secret order for nothing. Gherkin was outraged. This blacksmith had attacked him out of the blue and called it a test. He was some kind of idiotic NPC. The system announced that the player had earned the titles first to speak to the blacksmith and first to survive a clash with the blacksmith. The young man noted that these titles provided some pretty cool bonuses. Ulf asked if the young man was satisfied now. These days, newbies have no idea what patience is. Gherkin made a heart shape with his fingers and said he loved the blacksmith. The young man grabbed the old man by the leg and told him to use him however he wanted. Cleaning, laundry, he was ready for anything. Ulf blushed with indignation and asked what was wrong with this guy. Gherkin said that his dear Ulf was the love of his life. The old man threw a sack at the young man and told him to get out of there immediately. He ordered the young man to take it to the Bach forest. Hirkin stepped out of the smithy and said that now that he knew the old man handed out such titles, he was ready to go through anything. A new quest was registered. Ulf's request? You must deliver the bag to the inhabitants of the Bachheim forest. The young man thought that the only ones he would meet there were elves. The protagonist realized he had one problem. After all, elves are usually hostile toward humans. They live hidden in the forest, and finding them is even harder because they move around frequently. Gherkin thought that in his past life, some people had drawn maps to help find them, but those maps most likely no longer existed. The young man decided he had only one option and went out to the central square of the village of Urgel. The protagonist drew attention to himself and said he would buy information about the Bachheim forest. He was willing to offer tens of thousands of gold coins depending on the quality and recency of the information. The hunters recognized our hero. After all, it was Mask of Ha-Ho. But what was he doing here? The young man felt a little embarrassed, but it was the best he could come up with. If he had placed an official request to buy information, he would have risked the top 30 guilds finding out about him. Better to be a little embarrassed than to wander the mountains in vain all day. Suddenly, a huge hunter appeared in the square, accompanied by a gigantic beast. The hunter turned to our hero and asked if he was Masked Ha-Ho. The young shopkeeper recognized the hunter. It was Pitbull Singh. The other players recognized this man. Could it really be Pitbull Singh? He's one of the top 100, but what is he doing in a place like this? Could he be planning to fight Mask of Ha-Ho? The young man remembered that he had fought this hunter once in a past life. Gherkin had won back then, but he wasn't an incredibly strong fighter. Back then, the fight had been conducted by the book, observing all traditions and rituals. The young man couldn't guarantee victory if he fought this hunter now, but Pitbull was certain that Mask of Ha-Ho would win. One of the hunters said that this man's nickname is Pitbull because he mercilessly destroys his enemies. Besides, his skill level is much higher than that of Kaho's mask. The young man had heard talk that he wouldn't stand a chance against this Pitbull. Gherkin shouted for everyone to be quiet because he could hear them talking about him. Pitbull said he'd heard the young man buying information about the Bachheim forest. The thug added that he was ready to tell everything about that forest. Would the young man listen to him? Hirkin thought it was a trap. Could Pitbull really know about the Bachheim forest? The protagonist asked how much this information would cost. Pitbull Singh said he wanted to confess his love. Those around them were surprised. Could it be that Pitbull had decided to confess his love to Masked Ha-Ho? Our hero was emotionally crushed. How could this have happened? Pitbull told the young man to catch his breath and calm down first. Gherkin replied that he couldn't calm down. Whose fault is this anyway? Because Pitbull suddenly blurted out his confession in the square, chaos ensued, and they had to rush off to the nearest forest. Gherkin admitted that men weren't his type, so he was rejecting this confession. Pitbull was outraged. What on earth is this guy talking about? He hadn't confessed his love to him. Gherkin looked at his companion and said that in that case, he didn't understand anything at all. Pitbull said that it happened a few months ago, when he was hunting in those parts as usual. Pitbull looked back and saw a small rabbit. He thought it must be a monster. A woman's voice was heard. Pitbull happened to meet a girl. She walked up to the rabbit and said that one shouldn't walk here alone. Pitbull Singh said that this girl was more beautiful than any creature he had ever seen. Pitbull wanted to talk to her, but he couldn't get the words out. The girl ran away and disappeared into the thicket. He never saw her again. The big guy stood where she had disappeared, hoping she would reappear. A lot of time has passed, several months. Winter came and went, but she never showed up. Pitbull said he'd gathered all the information about the elves from the local NPCs. Gherkin asked, "Isn't that stalking?" The bruiser continued, "Even after checking all the places where residents supposedly saw elves, he hadn't had any luck." Just as he was about to give up, he noticed Ha-Ho's mask searching for information about the Baheim forest and the elves. Pitbull said he decided to ask the young man for help. The protagonist understood why this man had acted that way. In that case, he shouldn't have talked about a confession of love. He should have just said so right away. Our hero thought he had gotten involved with a very tiresome person. However, the quest needed to be completed quickly, and if there were even the slightest clues about the elves, this information had to be used. Gherkin told his companion to take him to the place where the chances of an encounter were highest. Pitbull led the young man to the base of a large waterfall. Gherkin looked around the area. Pitbull said, "According to the locals, they've been spotted most often at the Bekong waterfall. They've also been seen under a huge oak tree and at the village entrance." Gherkin replied that he understood everything. This information would suffice for now. The protagonist asked, "Monsters hang out here too, right?" Pitbull confirmed this. "Large monsters often appear here, so caution is necessary." The love-struck bruiser asked if there were any theories. Gherkin suggested proceeding as usual for now. They needed to start by hunting monsters. At that moment, a huge level 90 tree snake monster appeared above the waterfall. Pitbull wanted to deal with this monster, but the young man said he would take care of it. Pitbull asked if masked Ha-Ho was sure. The tree snake was quite high level. It wouldn't be easy to handle. Our hero reminded the bruiser that he was masked Ha-Ho, drew his sword, and charged at the tree snake. The snake attacked the young man in response, and our hero, losing his balance, was sent flying far backward. Pitbull looked at his companion and even began to doubt his abilities. The young man was knocked out and lay under a tree. Masked Ha-Ho turned and said that it had been very painful. The young man kept screaming that he felt terrible and might already be dying. Pitbull and the tree snake looked at the young man in surprise. Pitbull asked what Mask of Ha-Ho was doing. The tree snake approached our hero again. Pitbull shouted that they needed to dodge immediately, or they might get hurt by the snake's attack. The protagonist continued his performance. Suddenly, an arrow appeared out of nowhere, flying swiftly toward the monster. The snake was struck. Its body was pierced right through. Arrows continued to fly. They struck the snake and caused explosions at the points of impact. Gherkin said that NPCs, the local inhabitants, are different from players. When they encounter a monster, they don't hunt it, but flee for their lives. Most likely, the villagers were fleeing from the monsters and found themselves in a dead end. And that was exactly when the elves appeared. Pitbull was surprised. Had Mask of Ha-Ho really figured this out from the very beginning? The young man confirmed it. Gherkin said that the kind elves they had been searching for so long had deigned to appear. The young man smiled and greeted the elves, introduced himself, and said he had come to them with a message from Lord Ulf. Gherkin added that it was a very important mission, so he would like them to invite him to their village. One of the female elves aimed an arrow at the young man and asked, "Have you really deceived us?" She reminded her companions that it was better not to help humans, since they were such vile, filthy, greedy creatures. The girl added that Lord Ulf would never have entrusted a mission to a swindler like this young man. Gherkin decided that this was going too far. Gherkin wondered what to do. Should he force his way through? But then the quest might get stuck. Pitbull Singh suddenly dropped to his knees. Gherkin looked at his companion and wondered, what is this guy up to? Pitbull apologized to the elves for deceiving them and said that he simply had to meet the girls. The bruiser said that he had met them once before in the forest and fallen in love at first sight. Pitbull asked the elf to give him a chance to get to know her better. Gherkin was baffled. What is this guy up to? They already hate humans. Does he really want to be labeled a stalker on top of that? The girl agreed. The elves told their friend, if it's Pallaby, there's nothing we can do about it. The protagonist didn't understand what was going on. The elves were told that Salin had even charmed a human man. The girls told Pitbull that they would show him where the village was and suggested he follow them. Gherkin was angry at this game. Why was everything turning out this way? The meeting with the elves quest had been completed. Gherkin wondered, was this really a dating simulator with beauties? Why had everything turned out exactly like this? Pitbull Singh said he was so happy he was ready for anything right now. Gherkin decided this guy had nothing but roses in his head. Gurkhan said that they had nearly died at the hands of the elves just now. Was it worth smiling just because his confession had been accepted? Caution was necessary. Beautiful girls are the most dangerous. Our hero added that he knows a girl who's prettier than these elves, but she's a total psychopath. Pitbull said he loves her not for her beauty. The bruiser added that he likes elves not just because they're beautiful. For him, elves are a symbol of fantasy, and Pitbull Singh was absolutely serious. Gherkin decided that his companion was a real pervert. How could anyone say such a thing? The bruiser added that as a child he played games, read novels, and read manga. Elves always appeared in them as a symbol of fantasy. Wandering through a fantasy world and going on adventures with such companions, that had been his lifelong dream. Pitbull Singh even got teary-eyed after talking about his childhood. Gherkin was surprised. How could this bruiser say such things? And how did this relate to confessing his love to an elf? Pitbull asked his companion, wasn't that true for him? Wasn't he playing this game to fulfill his dream? Gurkhan replied that he didn't have such strange dreams. Our hero added that he wanted to become the strongest in this game and crush all the scoundrels who had looked down on him. That was his dream, if you could call it that. The young man added that he was curious to see the looks on their faces when that happened. He even got goosebumps just imagining it. Pitbull asked, won't Mask of Ha-Ho end up just like those who despised him? Gurkhan asked, so what? The law of the jungle is the truth of the world. The weak are weeded out. Pitbull replied that in that case, what happened to the young man was only natural. Happiness gained by humiliating others isn't real. Gherkin couldn't hold back and punched Pitbull in the face. The elves saw the commotion between the young men. A cloud of dust rose. Gherkin asked Pitbull, what do you actually know? Dreams and happiness are just nonsense that only those who have everything can spout. Does Pitbull know what it's like to struggle to survive day after day? When even the little you had is taken away in an instant. Does Pitbull know what that's like? Gherkin added that he didn't care that the big guy had nothing but flowers in his head. However, it was time to stop with the lectures. The elves told the humans to stop making noise. They had already reached the village. The young people came to a huge tree, at the foot of which lay the elven village. An elf girl said that their elder was in the tallest tree. Gurkhan asked to be taken to the elder. The elf girl asked Pitbull, had he really quarreled with his companion? The young people entered the elder's house, and the elf girl told Lady Dra that she had brought the people. The girl added that this guy had come with a message from Lord Ulf. Hirkin kept thinking about Pitbull. That guy had started spouting some nonsense. The young man hadn't even realized how he'd lost his temper. He had to stop thinking about it. He wouldn't see Pitbull again anyway. He needed to focus on completing the main quest. The elder entered the room and asked, is Mr. Ulf's errand related to the secret order? The protagonist handed Ulf's item over to the Baheim tribe. The quest Ulf's assignment is complete. Inside the bag was an epic item that removed all negative effects and debuffs. The Diadem of Purification. The young man saw the item that Ulf had given to the elves for the first time. No wonder he had sealed it away. Now the young man must eliminate the fallen elves and find out who is behind the second main quest. In that case, he would receive the Diadem of Purification as a reward. Gurkhan thought that was a job well done. Elder Dra said that the young man could leave now. The protagonist was surprised. Weren't there any other tasks for him? For example, using this item to save someone? The answer was no. The elven elder said she had no more tasks for him. The young man wasn't ready to be entrusted with anything. He was too weak. It was a level restriction. However, our hero couldn't just give up on the main quest so easily. Still, hunting beavers was simply impossible. His level was too low to continue the quest. Gurkhan replied that he understood everything and added that he would return when he became stronger. Our hero was dissatisfied. The young man returned to the forest and, together with his skeletons, continued to slay monsters to level up. However, the Thunder Hunters were making the fastest progress in the main quest. Recently, the leader of the Thunder Hunters Guild destroyed Helm's ogres, so she's surely already in the Urgel Mountains. After all, they don't need to go to the battlefield. Gherkin decided he'd been slacking off too much lately. He should have slept less. He would have cleared the 100th level long ago. Pitbull Singh believed that what had happened to Kaho's mask was also quite natural. The protagonist didn't know why he had to listen to such things. Gherkin continued to fight monsters and still felt very tired. Pitbull shared his thoughts with the elf, and she realized that something important had happened between the companions. Celine asked why Pitbull shouldn't go and sincerely apologized to Mask of Ha-Ho. The girl said that in that case, everything might be resolved much faster and easier than Pitbull thinks. The elf noted that this is usually how things go between friends. Hirkin suddenly spotted Pitbull, who had just fiercely destroyed the nearest monster. The bruiser said he had come to apologize. It seemed he had arrived just in time. Hirkin looked at Pitbull in surprise. This appearance was quite unexpected for the protagonist. Pitbull Singh said he wanted to tell Masked Haho something. The young man asked in surprise, "Who is he?" He appeared out of nowhere and is acting like this. Hirkin added that if the thug had come looking for trouble, he could get lost. The skeletons sensed their master's tone and began to show aggression toward Pitbull. Pitbull apologized. The tough guy added that he'd said that because he was worried. Interfering without knowing anything, it really was nothing more than lecturing. Hirkin said that if the thug was so sorry, he could help him hunt monsters. Pitbull asked, "Does Mask of Haho accept the apology?" Hirkin declared that he would wring every last drop of juice out of the big guy, so that he might come to regret it. Pitbull said that these apologies were costing him dearly. Hirkin said he accepted them. The companions continued their conversation while huge monsters gathered around them. Without a word, the young men turned, clenched their fists, and pounced on the monsters. A truce was called. The monsters were defeated and experience was gained. Thus, the protagonist was able to raise his level to the required one. Hirkin was exhausted and sank to the ground. He said he had finally reached level 100. Pitbull added that the schedule had been absolutely insane. Hirkin admitted that he had slept less than 3 hours in 3 days. Pitbull Singh said he was quitting the game now. Hirkin was surprised. In any case, our hero understood that with the 100th level, he would be able to progress through the main quest without any problems. Pitbull understood this too. Hirkin hesitantly said he was grateful to Pitbull. The bruiser told Mask of Haho not to be shy, since they were men. It looked gross. The next moment, Pitbull Singh vanished, simply dissolving into thin air. Hirkin cursed at the bruiser again. Why was Pitbull doing this? Elder Dre said that she could entrust the search for the child to someone like this young man. However, conversation was impossible while he was in a state of corruption. The elder said that, in light of this, she would give the young man this item. The protagonist received the Diadem of Purification for the duration of the quest. The Fallen Angel quest began. The elder said she was counting on the young man. Hirkin replied that she could have no doubt. He would fulfill the mission entrusted to him. Hirkin believed he would finish this quest quickly and claim the diadem for himself. The young man asked where he should go. The elder replied that she didn't know. If they had known, they would have completed the quest themselves. Doctra turned around and said she was counting on the young man. Hirkin wanted at least a hint, but there was nothing. The young man cursed the game again. The guy didn't understand how he was supposed to find a single, randomly appearing fallen elf on this huge map. Our hero thought he'd solved his leveling problem, but now a new one had arisen. In that case, there was nothing to be done. He'd have to buy information again. However, just like last time, you can't openly buy information. If you reveal the keyword Fallen Elf from the main quest, everyone will pounce on him like a pack of dogs. However, our hero always had a backup plan in mind. At this point, it's still unknown, but in reality, the role of the Fallen Elf is to create an army of monsters. That is precisely why a huge number of monsters appear around the Fallen Elf. Hirkin thought that if he spread a rumor about buying the coordinates of such monsters, those who suspect nothing would bring him the information themselves. Hirkin decided that after receiving the information, he would collect and organize it. By analyzing the data, he would draw the necessary conclusion. Hirkin decided that in this way, he would be able to calculate the location of the Fallen Elf. Hirkin thought he was truly a genius for having devised such a brilliant plan. A man approached our hero and asked if he was looking for information about monsters. Hirkin looked at the man and recognized him. The protagonist couldn't believe his eyes. Standing before him was Matador Cheb. A while back at the Red Bull's base, Matador Cheb had asked what had happened. The girl asked if Cheb remembered the anonymous message with the location of the Count of Darkness. Cheb replied that he did. The girl said that a new message had come from him. He was ready to buy the coordinates of the recently created monsters. But why would he need that? Cheb suggested that it was just a smokescreen. Someone who knows such important information as the Count of Darkness's location wouldn't be wasting time on trivial matters at this stage. Searching for monsters is just an excuse. In reality, his goal lies elsewhere. The girl said it sounded tempting. It wouldn't be a bad idea to monopolize that source of information. The Matador agreed with his companion and said that in that case, he would go to get the goose that lays the golden eggs. Our hero thought some low-level guild member would show up. In that case, he would simply get the necessary information and disappear. But why did that monster Cheb show up? Then the plan is off. Hirkin decided he needed to get out of there quickly so as not to arouse suspicion. Cheb asked, "Does the young man really think he can escape from me?" Hirkin thought this guy was too sharp. Hirkin ordered the summoned skeletons to immediately cease their attack. Matador Cheb declared that the young man had acted wisely. If he had decided to attack now, he would already be dead. It was a harsh truth, but true. The protagonist could not have defeated Matador Cheb. Cheb noted that this guy's physical stats were not at all typical for a novice. What could he say to that? He also possessed knowledge surpassing that of many guilds. Matador Cheb asked the young man who he really was. Hirkin tilted his head back, as if asking the good people for help. Cheb was surprised. What is this guy up to? Hirkin shouted that he was just a newbie who knew nothing. A major guild like the Red Bulls was threatening a newbie. Hirkin continued to play his part. He said he had come to learn about monsters and knew nothing at all. Hirkin wondered if he looked pitiful enough. Wasn't it at all suspicious? The Matador apologized and said it was a misunderstanding. The informant and this young man were completely different people. Hirkin decided his act had worked. Hirkin told the guildmaster to pay closer attention next time and avoid misunderstandings. The guild leader said that the 5 billion credit advance was canceled. He had planned to offer the best salary, benefits, and bonuses in the industry. Hirkin was taken aback by these words. Matador Cheb said there was nothing to be done since it turned out to be the wrong person. Hirkin told the guild leader that he had dreamed of joining the Red Bulls since childhood. Hirkin told his interlocutor that he couldn't believe an advance of 5 billion was even possible. The guild leader must abandon the idea that people can be bought with money. Cheb remarked that the young man's face suggested otherwise. Matador Cheb asked the young man if Mask of Hajo wanted to join the Red Bulls on the same terms. The guild leader asked what Mask of Hajo would say if he told him he would destroy him right then and there for refusing. Hirkin replied that he didn't want to join anywhere. He would become the strongest and wouldn't depend on anyone unless Matador Cheb did exactly as he had just said. Hirkin added that his interlocutor should be prepared. When he became the strongest, his guild would be the first. Cheb looked into the distance and said that the view here was pretty nice. Hirkin was surprised. What is the guild leader up to now? Cheb said he knew. The Red Lake. Their intelligence had obtained this data, so the information was reliable. They say the number of new monsters there has skyrocketed. Hirkin was surprised. Why was Matador Cheb telling him this? He was a rival, after all. The guild leader said he didn't consider some weakling his rival. He shouldn't overestimate himself. Cheb added that the Red Bulls were the strongest guild. They wouldn't lose to anyone. Cheb added that he gave the young man the information because the desire to handle things on his own was commendable. So there was no need to worry. Matador waved his hand and said goodbye. Hirkin said that if the elf didn't have the key, it seemed the Red Bulls were completing the main quest through the dwarves. He said that what Matador was looking for was on Salt Mountain. Hirkin asked, "Is the guild leader getting nervous now? Who did he call a weakling? In terms of gaming experience, he's been playing much longer than the others." Matador laughed. The protagonist was surprised. What kind of reaction was that? Cheb asked if people often told the young man he was a fool. Who on earth was sharing this information? Hirkin got angry, turned around, and walked away, accompanied by his skeletons. Hirkin contacted his companion, Yell, and said he hadn't managed to recruit this man. Cheb added that he was curious to see how well this man could operate on his own. Cheb laughed and added that, in the end, everything had turned out for the best. Cheb told her everything and noted that he hadn't made any mistakes. After hearing Yell's response, Matador admitted his guilt, but asked her not to take any action. After returning, this guy had been incredibly lucky. Hirkin believed he had obtained the necessary information. Looking at the skeletons, he thought that these guys were having fun, completely unaware of what was on their master's mind. Hirkin ordered the skeletons to mobilize immediately. Why are they running through the red water? His companion said it was really cool. Hirkin could go over and touch it himself. The young man replied that he didn't have time for games. Hirkin said there were many medium and large level 120 bosses here. It was necessary to destroy as many of them as possible and level up. Hirkin thought that the Red Lake was a place he was quite familiar with. The young man told the skeletons once again to stop fooling around and line up in a row. Hirkin saw people running toward him. One warrior, 2 mages, and 1 priest. Could this be an ambush? Gherkin warned the skeletons to attack on his command. The people ran up to our hero and stopped. They asked Lord Mask of Haho to help them. Gherkin asked, did they really want him to help catch the fallen gray cockatrice? Gherkin asked these people why they weren't catching it themselves. A man replied that they were from the second squad of the Golden Brothers raid group. The Golden Brothers themselves are a fairly well-known guild, considered a rising star among the top 30. However, they belong to the second squad. No one takes them seriously, and they've been subjected to oppression for many years. Gherkin told the guy to cut his story down to 3 lines. The man said that if they don't catch the cockatrice, they'll be kicked out of the guild. They're asking for help. Gherkin replied that he refuses and added that the conversation is over. The second group began to beg Mr. Mask of Haho. They have nowhere else to go. They even offered money, 200,000 gold pieces. Gherkin said that was too little. He wouldn't agree. The people said that was all they had. After the capture, they would hand over all the loot. They desperately needed help. Gherkin thought he was too lazy, but he was going to clean up the fallen monsters anyway. Gherkin said he'd agree to an advance of 20,000, and all the trophies would belong to him. The people were delighted and wished Mask Haho good health. Gherkin said he was waiting for the advance. The people handed over the money and thanked Mask of Haho once again for his willingness to help. A man from the second group recalled how he had previously asked Apollo to give them a little time so they could repay the debt. This event took place on Apollo's slave farm. The man added that he would definitely repay the debt. This place was mostly for those who couldn't pay back their debt. They were turned into slaves. Apollo thought about it and said he was willing to give these people a chance. Apollo added that they needed to deal with Haho's mask. The man asked a reasonable question: how could they handle such a powerful player? Apollo replied that he would lend them top-tier gear. Apollo added that they would swarm Haho's mask as a group and set a trap. They could do whatever they wanted, but they had to destroy him. The fat man warned that if they failed, they would rot here alive. The group realized they had no way out. When the Haho mask was distracted by a powerful monster, they were to attack all at once and finish him off. That was the plan. Gherkin approached the designated spot and discovered a huge monster. Behind the hero were armed men. Standing before the young man was a level 120 fallen gray cockatrice. Gherkin said that this monster was very noisy. Was that really all it was capable of? The villains prepared to attack the young man from behind. Gherkin told the men from the second squad that he would strip the monster of its armor, and then they would have to handle the rest on their own. The men agreed. Gherkin activated the leg-strengthening skill and charged at the monster. Gherkin said that this monster was somehow slow and he would handle it easily. The conspirators were surprised. Could this man really have stripped the armor from the cockatrice? Gherkin declared that it had been easy. He'd stripped off the torso, only the helmet remained. Gherkin prepared to attack again and said he would destroy these chicken brains right now. The conspirators attacked our hero from behind. The young man looked back and saw the danger approaching from behind. A powerful explosion rang out. The men from the second squad thought they had achieved their goal. This was followed by another strike, a finishing blow to secure their victory. 4 explosions rang out one after another. A man said that they had finally finished off Haho's mask. The conspirators began to rejoice, for they had succeeded. Now they would be freed from slavery. Gherkin said he knew it all along, because everything had been suspicious from the start. These people pretend to be beggars, yet they themselves wear top-of-the-line uniforms. On top of that, they even sent him, a necromancer, to the vanguard. Gherkin said he had prepared in advance. The skills Skin Sewing and False Heart had been activated. Gherkin told these Golden Brothers, or Rusty Brothers, to brace for the consequences. Gherkin activated his armor, armed the skeletons, and said that these people's end was now at hand. The Golden Brothers activated their magic and tried to defend themselves. Gherkin was surprised. Were they really going to shoot again? Gherkin noticed that the cockatrice wasn't going to just stand there. A huge monster appeared above the young man again. Gherkin realized that if everyone understood, they could confidently prepare for destruction. The system reported that the fallen elf had appeared nearby. Gherkin was surprised. What was that? Indeed, a fallen elf appeared from behind the trees. The system reported that the fallen elf was beginning to flee. The system reported that they must pursue the fallen elf for 3 minutes. The young man thought that the elf had come to check on the cockatrice right at that moment. Gherkin told the Rusty Brothers that until he returned, They were to hunt the cockatrice together with the skeletons. The young Gherkin thought this was his chance. If he caught the fallen elf right here, he could significantly shorten the quest time. The protagonist understood that catching her was only a matter of time. In this main quest, first place would be his. However, even with his slot activated and his legs enhanced, the distance wasn't closing. The young man used a bone bomb and threw it toward the fallen elf. Explosions rang out, but the fallen elf managed to dodge. Gherkin knew that this game had never given him an easy path. The quest wasn't too simple. Time was running out, but the young man felt he couldn't fail the main quest right now. Gherkin decided to try a different approach and threw the bone bomb to gain momentum. In an instant, he caught up to the fallen elf. Gherkin grabbed the elf girl and said she'd finally been caught. Gherkin grabbed the girl by the head and leaned in close to her. The fallen elf didn't resist. Gherkin pressed down harder on the girl, and blood began to trickle from her mouth. Her eyes glowed red. Gherkin told her to wake up immediately. What would he do if she died here? The young man shouted that they had to complete the main quest. She couldn't do this to him. Gherkin placed the diadem of purification on the fallen elf's head. It worked. Gherkin carried the girl to a safe place and laid her down on the ground under a tree. Gherkin thought the quest was complete. Could her behavior have been scripted? What a terrible plot. The young man was puzzled. If that was the case, then why was the chase necessary? Why the time limit? The Golden Brothers asked the summoned skeletons to help them. They couldn't hold back the cockatrice on their own. The skeletons were playing with a ball at the time. Gherkin returned to the Golden Brothers, summoned a golem, and destroyed the cockatrice. The men explained that the Apollo Guild had sent them. Because of their debts, they had no choice. Gherkin thought the Apollo Guild had acted despicably. Even if he was getting in their way, did they really need to hire mercenaries? Gherkin looked at the unique, top-tier items the mercenaries were wearing. You couldn't even find such things at an auction. Even if Apollo had a lot of money, it would be difficult to get hold of them. Gherkin remembered that a hitman from Big Smile had come by recently. Could it be that those who hated him had formed an alliance? Gherkin thought that in that case, he would have to take action as well, and told these men to get up. However, he had no intention of letting them off the hook. They also had to transfer 500,000 gold coins to him every week. The men thought this man was worse than Apollo. The head of the Big Smile Guild was in his office listening to elegant classical music. Hirkin thought that a moment of relaxation amid his intense work was his only oasis. An assistant burst into the office and said that trouble had struck. The guild leader replied that he was on a break and to come back later. The assistant said that the Red Bulls had declared war on them. Hirkin immediately jumped up, looking alarmed. The Red Bulls said this was payback for tampering with the Ha-Ho mask. Hirkin was surprised. Could they really be connected? The guild leader said it was a misunderstanding. That's exactly what they should tell them. They want to resolve everything peacefully. The assistant reported that the unique items recently loaned to the Apollo Guild were being put up for auction. They're listed at the highest market price. It won't be easy to buy them back. Hirkin was surprised. Who's selling them? The assistant replied that it was the Ha-Ho mask. Hirkin began to curse and rail against our hero. At that moment, the young man's ear itched more intensely than ever. The elven village in the Baheim forest. Elder Dra told the young man to leave the diadem of purification here. She couldn't trust this guy with it. It was too dangerous. Gherkin was angry. After all, the elder would let him use the diadem in the future anyway, so he might as well have left it. In the next quest, the young man must find the place indicated by the fallen elf's legacy and uncover its secret. Gherkin thought that the legacy was most likely the note given to him by the fallen elf. The note read, "Where the eagle looks, blue clouds spread out in that place, a village hidden among them." The young man was exasperated. Why do the elves have to make everything so complicated? Even their clues are awkward. Why do they write poetry? Gherkin decided he would have to ask someone who knew the elven language well. Pitbull Singh said he hadn't seen the Mask of Ha-Ho in a long time. Pitbull asked the young man, by what twist of fate had he ended up in his paradise? There were many beautiful elven women around the big guy. One of the elves was feeding the big guy some fruit at that moment. Pitbull thanked her. Another elf said that he always spoils only Aisha. Pitbull replied that that wasn't true because he loved them all. Gherkin asked what the big guy was up to here. Why was he flirting with the elves? Singh replied that it just happened that way. To stay in the elven village longer, you need to increase the residents' affection level. Pitbull added that because of this, he had to try hard. Gherkin was surprised. Is that really all there is to the quest? The elf aimed an arrow at our hero and told that ugly man to step aside. How dare he touch Lord Singh with his filthy hands? Pitbull told the girls to calm down because fighting is bad. The elf girl pointed out that this man had tried to harm Lord Singh. Pitbull was surprised. Who would dare to harm him? Gherkin was baffled. While some people struggle with quests, this thug is just playing a dating simulator with elves and calling it a quest? Where's the justice in that? Gherkin punched the bruiser in the stomach. Pitbull didn't flinch. He asked what had brought the young man here after all. Just looking at men makes him sick. Gherkin told Pitbull to help translate the message into understandable language. Pitbull read the scroll and said it pointed to the forest of blue mist. Gherkin was surprised. Did Singh really understand it right away? Did he really specialize in the elvish language? Where the eagle looks, that's probably a high place. The blue clouds, that's the blue mist of that forest, said Pitbull. He was surprised. Did Mask of Ha-Ho really not understand that? Singh asked. Maybe the young man would stop just playing around and start reading books. After all, an intellectual man is very handsome. Gherkin was puzzled, for elves hate humans. Why had they all gone mad over Pitbull? The young man said that being alone was normal too. The summoned skeletons agreed with him. Gherkin continued to be indignant. Did Pitbull really think he was angry out of jealousy? He too had read a lot as a child and could also assemble a harem if he wanted to. Suddenly, a huge monster appeared above our hero, a level 110 Smogrian. Gherkin was still angry and attacked the monster furiously. He said they shouldn't treat him like a fool here. The system reported that the player had defeated the Smogrian. His level had increased. Gherkin was surprised. Was this really the place? Where did these Smogrian come from? Singh told Mask of Ha-Ho to be careful. This forest belongs to the Cleaners Guild, which is ranked in the top 30. Gherkin replied that he'd heard about it and had prepared thoroughly. But there was no sign of the guild or anyone here. Gherkin decided that Pitbull had said that on purpose to scare him. A huge man emerged from the forest and told the stranger to state his affiliation. Gherkin immediately realized that he was facing one of the cleaners. The young man replied that he had no affiliation. The masked giant said that in that case, he was dealing with a trespasser. Gherkin felt the field around him change. A blue mist appeared. The masked man said that intruders must be eliminated. It was the fallen hero of Avan. His level could not be determined. Gherkin realized that the hero from the main quest was standing before him. This was exactly what he needed. The rivals rushed at each other and their swords clashed. Sparks flew in all directions. Gherkin sensed a powerful aura emanating from his opponent. The protagonist summoned his skeletons to his aid. The system reported that the skeleton warriors had been destroyed. The fallen hero acted decisively. Gherkin said he would never forgive his opponent for this. Why did he destroy the skeletons? After all, they needed to gain practical experience. The system reported that physical attacks on the fallen hero were ineffective. Gherkin was surprised. Could it be that cheat settings were already enabled here? Gherkin summoned the skeleton mage to help. This time there was work for him too. The ghost hero directed his energy attack at the skeleton mage. The system reported that this skeleton had also been destroyed. Gherkin was surprised. Physical attacks don't work. Magic doesn't hit. How on earth can you destroy a monster like this?